The courtroom door slammed shut behind her, and Aria Bennett's hands were still shaking. She had just admitted under oath that her marriage began as a transaction, a contract signed to erase her father's debt and strengthen a widower's custody claim. The opposing attorney smiled like a hunter who'd cornered prey. Victor Callahan sat motionless at the defense table, his jaw tight, his eyes fixed on his 8-year-old daughter. Mila's small hand gripped the edge of her seat. Everything Aria had quietly built over 6 months, the trust, the fragile sense of home, the unspoken shift from stranger to something she couldn't name, was about to be destroyed by the truth she'd just spoken aloud. Before we dive into how Aria ended up in that courtroom, fighting for a family she never planned to join, drop a like on this video and comment your city below so I can see how far this story travels. Now let's go back to where it all began. The invitation arrived on cream-colored cardstock, embossed lettering announcing her father's 50th birthday celebration at the Grandview Country Club. Aria Bennett turned it over in her hands, studying the elegant script with the detached curiosity of an anthropologist examining an artifact from a foreign culture. 6 months ago, she would have been excited. 6 months ago, her father's 50th would have meant champagne toasts and carefully orchestrated networking opportunities with Seattle's financial elite. 6 months ago, their lives hadn't imploded. She set the invitation on her dorm desk beside a stack of international relations textbooks and returned her attention to the research paper on diplomatic negotiation theory that was due in 72 hours. The irony wasn't lost on her. She was studying conflict resolution while her family's conflicts multiplied like aggressive bacteria in a petri dish. Her phone buzzed. Her mother's name appeared on the screen. "Aria, darling." Claire Bennett's voice carried that particular tone of strained optimism that had become her default setting since everything fell apart. "Did you receive the invitation?" "I did. Your father would really love to see you there. It's been difficult for him, you know. He's been working so hard to rebuild." Aria bit back the response that wanted to escape. Her father, Richard Bennett, had been working hard at a series of increasingly desperate ventures since his hedge fund collapsed under the weight of his own reckless investments. The regulatory fines alone had been catastrophic. The lawsuits had been worse. The criminal investigation had been, as her mother would say, unfortunate timing. "I have a paper due Monday," Aria said instead. "Surely you can take one evening. It's his 50th birthday." The guilt arrived on schedule, punctual as always. Aria closed her eyes. "What time should I be there?" 7. "And Aria?" Her mother's voice softened. "Wear something nice. There will be important people attending." After they disconnected, Aria sat in the silence of her dorm room and wondered what important people were still willing to be seen with Richard Bennett. 6 months ago, he'd been a rising star in Seattle's financial community, the kind of man who collected board positions and charity galas the way other people collected stamps. Now he was toxic, untouchable, except apparently by whoever had agreed to attend his birthday dinner. She should have known it was a trap. Bam. The Grandview Country Club occupied a hill overlooking Elliott Bay with the kind of understated elegance that screamed old money. Aria arrived in the black dress her mother had bought her for her grandfather's funeral 2 years ago, feeling underdressed despite the designer label. The valet took her elderly Honda Civic with the same professional courtesy he probably extended to Maseratis, which somehow made it worse. Inside, the private dining room glowed with candlelight and careful ambition. Her father stood near the bar, laughing too loudly at something a silver-haired man had said. Her mother circulated with practiced grace, her smile never quite reaching her eyes. Aria recognized perhaps a third of the guests, some distant cousins, a few family friends who hadn't completely abandoned ship, several people she didn't know at all. "Aria!" Her father spotted her and beckoned her over with the expansive gesture of a man who'd already had several drinks. "Come meet Victor Callahan. Victor, this is my daughter. She's studying at Washington International Relations, Dean's List every semester." The man who turned to face her didn't look like the kind of person who attended birthday parties for disgraced financiers. He was tall, perhaps 6'2", with the kind of presence that suggested he'd walked into the room knowing exactly what he wanted and precisely how to get it. His suit was immaculate without being flashy, charcoal gray, perfectly tailored, the kind of quality that didn't need labels. Dark hair showed threads of silver at the temples. His eyes were steel blue, assessing her with the same calm calculation she imagined he applied to balance sheets and business strategies. He was, she realized with a small shock of recognition, probably around 40, and he was looking at her like she was a particularly interesting asset on a corporate acquisition list. "Ms. Bennett?" His handshake was firm, professional. "Your father speaks very highly of your academic achievements." "Does he?" Arya kept her tone neutral. "That's generous of him." Something flickered in Victor Callahan's expression, amusement, maybe, or approval. "I understand you're focusing on conflict resolution and diplomatic negotiations. Among other things, useful skills in any field." He released her hand, perhaps especially in family enterprises. Arya's father laughed again, that forced boom of false confidence. "Victor here is being modest. He's built Callahan Development from a single property into one of the Northwest's premier commercial real estate firms. 37 properties across 4 states. Just closed a deal in Portland last month." 36 properties, Victor corrected quietly. "We divested the Spokane retail complex." Her father waved this away like it was a minor detail rather than millions of dollars. "Victor and I have been discussing some potential partnership opportunities. Synergies between his real estate expertise and my financial background." Arya kept her expression carefully blank. Her father's financial background currently included settlement negotiations with the SEC and a lawsuit from 17 former clients. But Victor Callahan's face revealed nothing, no judgment, no concern, just that same calm assessment. "I'll let you two talk," Arya said. "I should say hello to Mom." "Actually," Victor said, and something in his tone made her pause. "I was hoping to speak with you privately, Ms. Bennett, if you have a few minutes." "Me?" "I have a proposition that might interest you." Her father beamed like he'd just closed a major deal. "Excellent. Use my study. Second door on the left down the hall. Take your time." Arya looked at Victor Callahan, at his calm expression and expensive suit, and felt the first whisper of unease. "What kind of proposition?" "The kind best discussed in private." He gestured toward the hallway. "Please, it won't take long." Every instinct she'd developed studying power dynamics and diplomatic maneuvering told her to refuse. But curiosity had always been her weakness, and something about the way her father was watching them, expectant, almost hungry, made her want to know what game was being played. 5 minutes, she said. The study was smaller than she'd expected, decorated in the club's signature style of leather furniture and hunting prints. Victor closed the door behind them and gestured to one of the chairs. Arya remained standing. "Your father owes approximately $2.4 million to various creditors," Victor said without preamble. "The lawsuits could push that higher, but let's use 2.4 as our baseline. The interest alone is approximately $18,000 per month. Your mother's family money is mostly tied up in trusts she can't access. Your father's remaining liquid assets might cover 6 months of legal fees before he's forced into bankruptcy. Am I correct so far?" Arya's mouth had gone dry. "How do you—" "I purchased the majority of his debt 2 weeks ago." The room tilted slightly. "You what?" "Purchased it, from the primary creditor and several smaller ones. I now hold approximately 80% of what your father owes." Victor's expression remained neutral, almost clinical. "Which means I can choose how to proceed. Aggressive collection, structured repayment, or forgiveness. The choice is mine." "Why would you do that?" "Because I need something, Ms. Bennett, and your father needs something, and I believe you're the solution that satisfies both requirements." Arya forced herself to sit down. Her legs suddenly felt unreliable. "What do you need?" Victor settled into the chair opposite her with the ease of a man completely comfortable with difficult conversations. "I'm a widower. My wife Caroline died 14 months ago. Ovarian cancer. We have a daughter, Mila. She's 8. I'm sorry for your loss." He acknowledged this with a slight nod. "Caroline's parents are Helen and Jonathan Ashford. Perhaps you know the name." She did. The Ashfords owned half of Bellevue's prime waterfront. Old money, political connections, the kind of family that appeared in Forbes alongside phrases like dynastic wealth and generational influence. "The Ashfords believe I'm an unsuitable single parent," Victor continued. "They filed for custody of Mila. Their argument is that my work schedule doesn't allow adequate parental attention, that a child needs a stable family environment, that I'm raising her in relative isolation in a mountain home rather than in their, he paused, something cold entering his tone, their proper community setting. That's ridiculous. Single parents raise children successfully all the time. Yes, but single parents don't usually have former in-laws with the resources to wage extended legal battles and the connections to influence family court judges. My attorney believes their case is weak, but he also believes they're positioning for a marathon, not a sprint. They'll file motion after motion, demand evaluation after evaluation, until either I capitulate or make a mistake that gives them ammunition. Arya was beginning to see where this was going. You want to get married? I want to establish what the court would view as a stable, two-parent household. A marriage would significantly strengthen my position. It would demonstrate commitment to creating a traditional family environment. It would eliminate their primary argument about Mila growing up without maternal influence. There are dating apps, matchmakers, normal ways to meet someone. Normal relationships take time. They're unpredictable. They come with emotional complications and no guaranteed timeline. I don't have the luxury of waiting to see if something develops organically. He leaned forward slightly. I need a legal marriage, Ms. Bennett, a legitimate partnership that can withstand court scrutiny. What I'm proposing is a business arrangement with clear terms and mutual benefit. You want to buy a wife? The words came out flat, almost clinical. I want to make a contractual agreement with someone intelligent enough to understand the terms and principled enough to honor them. Someone who needs what I can offer and who can offer what I need in return. My father's debt, among other things. I would pay off the entirety of what he owes immediately. Not as a payment to you, I want to be clear about that, but as a demonstration of my seriousness and capability. The debt would be eliminated before you make any decision. You would owe me nothing if you choose to refuse. Arya stared at him. You'd pay $2.4 million before I agree to anything? Yes. Why? Because I want you to choose freely. If the debt remains hanging over your family, any agreement you make is made under duress. That's not binding in my view, and it's not useful to me. I need someone who chooses this arrangement with clear eyes and genuine consent. Her mind was racing through implications like a chess player calculating moves ahead. What would you expect from this marriage? Legitimacy. You would move into my home. You would develop a relationship with Mila, genuine, not performed. You would appear at necessary social and legal functions as my wife. You would help create the stable environment the court is looking for. For how long? Until Mila is 18 and the custody question becomes moot. 10 years. 10 years. Arya laughed, the sound sharp and brittle. You're asking me to sign away a decade of my life. No, I'm offering you a clearly defined role with specific responsibilities and substantial compensation. You would finish your degree, I'd pay all expenses, you'd live in a comfortable home, you'd have freedom within reasonable parameters, and at the end, you'd walk away with enough financial security to do whatever you choose next. How much? $5 million. Paid in full when Mila turns 18 or when the Ashfords formally withdraw their custody claim, whichever comes first. The number was staggering, life-changing, the kind of money that could fund a decade of graduate education or launch a nonprofit or buy freedom from every financial anxiety she'd watched consume her parents. What about the other aspects of marriage? She asked carefully. We would maintain separate bedrooms. I have no interest in a romantic relationship, and I wouldn't expect one from you. Publicly, we would present as a married couple. Privately, we would have clearly defined boundaries. You've thought about this extensively. I've thought about very little else since the Ashfords filed their petition. For the first time, something like emotion crossed his face. Not vulnerability, exactly, but a crack in the perfect composure. I love my daughter, Ms. Bennett. I will do whatever is necessary to keep her safe and with me, but I won't lie to you about what this is. This isn't romance. This isn't a fairy tale. This is a business arrangement between two people who can help each other achieve essential objectives. Arya stood and walked to the window. Beyond the glass, Seattle glittered in the darkness like a field of fallen stars. Somewhere in that sprawl of light, her parents were probably worrying about next month's legal bills. Somewhere out there, an 8-year-old girl she'd never met was caught in the middle of a custody battle. Why me? She asked without turning around. You could find someone more suitable, someone older, more established, someone who wouldn't have to drop out of college. You wouldn't drop out. You'd continue your studies. As for why I've done my research, Ms. Bennett. Dean's List every semester. Debate team captain. Volunteer work with refugee resettlement programs. You're intelligent, articulate, and you understand negotiation and diplomacy. You're young enough that Mila might see you as someone between a parent and an older sister rather than as a replacement for her mother. And frankly, your current situation means you understand necessity. You won't romanticize this arrangement. You make it sound so rational. It is rational, that's the point. He stood and crossed to where she was standing. I'm offering you a choice, Ms. Bennett, not an ultimatum. Your father's debt will be paid regardless of your answer. You're free to say no and walk away. But if you say yes, you'll be making a decision that benefits everyone involved. Your family gains financial stability. I gain a strong position against the custody challenge. Mila gains a stable home environment. And I gain what? Money? Freedom, security, the ability to finish your education without debt, a clearly defined role with specific expectations rather than the chaos and uncertainty you're currently facing. And yes, substantial financial compensation for 10 years of your life. Arya turned to face him. In the dim light of the study, Victor Callahan looked like exactly what he was, a man accustomed to making difficult decisions and living with their consequences. There was no warmth in his expression, but there was also no cruelty, just calculation and clear-eyed assessment of costs and benefits. I need time to think, she said. Of course. I'll have my attorney draw up the preliminary terms. Review them with your own lawyer if you'd like. Take a week. 2 if you need it. He reached into his jacket and produced a business card. My direct number. Call anytime. She took the card. If I agree, when would this marriage take place? As soon as possible. The next custody hearing is in 6 weeks. I'd like to establish the new family dynamic before then. 6 weeks. I know it's fast, but I'm not asking you to feel anything, Ms. Bennett. I'm asking you to make a rational decision about a mutually beneficial arrangement. They stood there in the quiet study, 2 strangers discussing marriage with all the warmth of a corporate merger. Arya thought about her mother's strained optimism and her father's desperate networking. She thought about the stack of student loan statements on her desk and the unpaid tuition bill she'd been trying to ignore. She thought about an 8-year-old girl she'd never met, caught between a father who loved her and grandparents who thought money could purchase custody. I'll review the terms, she said finally. That's all I'm promising right now. That's all I'm asking. Victor extended his hand. Thank you for considering this, Ms. Bennett. His handshake was the same as before, firm, professional, absolutely neutral. Like they'd just concluded a business meeting rather than a conversation that could reshape the entire trajectory of her life. When she returned to the party, her father intercepted her immediately. Well, did Victor make his proposal? He did. And? Her father's eyes were bright with something that looked uncomfortably like hope. Are you going to accept? Arya looked at him, at this man who'd gambled with other people's money and lost, who'd brought his family to the edge of ruin through arrogance and poor judgment. She should be angry. She was angry. But she was also tired of watching her mother pretend everything was fine, tired of budget spreadsheets and collection calls, and the particular shame of scholarship applications that asked about family financial situations. I haven't decided yet, she said. Her mother appeared at her father's elbow, her expression carefully controlled. Darling, your father explained the situation. I know this must seem overwhelming, but Victor is a good man, respected, financially stable, and it's only temporary. Only 10 years. 10 years isn't so long in the grand scheme of things. And think of what it would mean for your future, for all our futures. Arya looked at her parents, at their matching expressions of desperate hope, and felt something cold settle in her chest. They'd already decided for her. In their minds, this wasn't a choice. It was a solution to a problem they'd created but couldn't solve themselves. I need to go, she said. I have that paper due Monday. She left before they could argue, escaped to her elderly Honda, and drove back to campus in a daze. In her dorm room, she pulled out the business card Victor had given her. The cardstock was heavy, expensive. Victor Callahan, President and CEO, Callahan Development. a Seattle address, a phone number. She set it on her desk next to the invitation to her father's birthday party and stared at both for a long moment. Then she opened her laptop and started researching. Bam. The internet had plenty to say about Victor Callahan. Business profiles described him as methodical, strategic, and intensely private. He'd built Callahan Development from a single property purchase 15 years ago into a regional powerhouse. No scandals, no lawsuits, no dramatic failures or spectacular controversies. He appeared in photos from charity galas and business conferences, always in a perfectly tailored suit, always with that same neutral expression. There was less about his late wife. Caroline Ashford Callahan had died 14 months ago after a brief illness. The obituary was tasteful and brief, noting her charity work and her survival by her husband and daughter. The Ashford family appeared in dozens of society photos, old money personified with their waterfront estate and their carefully curated public image. And then there was Mila. Arya found exactly 2 photos of Victor's daughter online, both from formal events. In one, she stood between her parents at some charity function, a serious-looking child with dark hair and her father's intense eyes. In the other, more recent photo, she held Victor's hand at what appeared to be a memorial service, her small face composed in a way that seemed far too adult for an 8-year-old. Arya stared at that second photo for a long time. The preliminary contract arrived 3 days later via courier, a thick packet of legal documents that laid out the arrangement in precise, bloodless language. Arya read it twice, then took it to the university's legal aid clinic, where a third-year law student with purple hair and multiple piercings looked increasingly stunned as she worked through the pages. "This is insane," the law student said finally. "He's basically offering you $5 million plus living expenses to be his wife for 10 years. I know. The prenup is actually pretty fair given the circumstances. You'd have access to household funds, your own accounts, no restrictions on your career or education. There's a morality clause, but it's reasonable. No affairs, no illegal activity, no public behavior that would undermine the custody case. What about the exit clause?" The law student flipped to the relevant section. "Either party can terminate with 6 months' notice, but you forfeit the $5 million if you're the one who initiates termination before the 10 years. If he initiates, you get prorated compensation based on years served. If the custody situation resolves earlier through the Ashfords withdrawing their claim, you get the full amount. So I'm locked in unless I want to walk away with nothing. Basically, though there are exceptions, abuse, fraud, material breach of contract, but yeah, if you just decide you don't want to do this anymore after 3 years, you're out millions." She set the documents down. "Can I ask a personal question?" "Sure. Are you actually considering this?" Arya thought about her father's debt, about her mother's forced optimism, about tuition bills and student loans, and the particular exhaustion of pretending to her classmates that everything was fine when her family was drowning. She thought about an 8-year-old girl who'd lost her mother and might lose her father too. "I think I am," she said quietly. "That's either the most pragmatic thing I've ever heard or completely insane. I genuinely can't tell which. Maybe it's both." She called Victor that evening from the empty study lounge in her dorm. He answered on the second ring. "Ms. Bennett, have you had a chance to review the terms?" "I have. I need to ask you something first." "Of course. If I agree to this, what happens to Mila? I mean, really happens. Not the legal strategy version. I need to understand what I'd be walking into." There was a pause on the other end of the line. When Victor spoke again, his voice had lost some of its professional neutrality. "Mila is quiet, observant. She's been through 2 years of watching her mother decline and then 14 months of grief and upheaval. The Ashfords visit twice a month and treat her like a trophy they're entitled to claim. She's developed anxiety, has to check that doors are locked twice before she can sleep. Won't go into her mother's old art studio anymore. What does she know about the custody battle? She knows her grandparents want her to come live with them. She knows I'm fighting to keep her home. I haven't lied to her about the situation, but I've tried to shield her from the worst of it. And what does she know about this arrangement? About me?" Another pause. "Nothing yet. I didn't want to introduce the idea until I knew whether you'd agree. If you say yes, I'll tell her that I've met someone, that we're going to get married. She'll have questions. I'll answer them honestly within age-appropriate boundaries." Will she be okay with this? I don't know. But I know she won't be okay if she's forced to live with the Ashfords. Helen and Jonathan they're not cruel people. They love their daughter. They love Mila in their way. But their love comes with expectations and conditions and a very rigid view of how life should be lived. Mila would be suffocated there. Arya closed her eyes. If I do this, I need you to understand something. I'm not going to pretend to be her mother. I can't replace what she lost. I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you to help create a stable environment where she can grow up with her actual parent, instead of being claimed by people who see her as a do-over for their dead daughter. One more question. Yes? Your contract says you'll pay my father's debt before I agree. Why does that matter so much to you? Because when I make commitments, I honor them completely. This arrangement only works if both of us choose it freely. If the debt hangs over your family, you're not free. I want you to be able to walk away if you decide this isn't right for you. That's either remarkably principled or extremely manipulative. Can it be both? There was the faintest hint of dry humor in his voice. I'm offering you a choice, Ms. Bennett. Not because I'm altruistic, I'm not. But because a choice freely made is worth infinitely more than one coerced by circumstance. Arya looked around the empty study lounge, at the worn furniture and flickering fluorescent lights. She thought about her international relations textbook and the paper on diplomatic negotiations she'd finally submitted that morning. She'd written about game theory and rational actor models, about how parties in conflict make decisions based on careful calculation of costs and benefits. This was the most carefully calculated decision she'd ever faced. Pay the debt, she said. You're accepting? I'm saying pay the debt first, then I'll give you my answer. Fair enough? She could hear the approval in his voice. I'll have the transfers initiated tomorrow. You should see confirmation within 48 hours. Victor? Yes? This is insane, isn't it? What we're talking about. Completely. He didn't sound bothered by this. But sometimes insane solutions are the only rational response to impossible situations. I'll be in touch once the debt is settled. He disconnected. Arya sat in the empty lounge and stared at her phone. 48 hours later, her father called, his voice shaking. The creditors are calling. They're saying the debt has been paid in full. Every single lawsuit settled. Arya, what did you do? I made a rational decision about a mutually beneficial arrangement. Does that mean? It means I'm still deciding, but yes, probably yes. Her father started to cry on the other end of the line, great gasping sobs of relief that made her chest ache. Her mother took the phone from him. Thank you, darling. Thank you. You're saving this family. I'm making a choice, Arya corrected. That's all, just a choice. But she knew, even as she said it, that the choice was already made, had been made the moment Victor Callahan explained his proposition with such clinical clarity, had been made when she looked at the photo of a serious 8-year-old girl holding her father's hand at a memorial service. She called Victor the next morning. I'll do it. I'll marry you. Are you certain? No, but I'm doing it anyway. That's honest, at least. I'll have my attorney finalize the paperwork. We can schedule the ceremony for 2 weeks from now if that works for you. 2 weeks? She laughed shakily. Most people take months to plan a wedding. Most people are marrying for different reasons. We're simply formalizing a contract. Right, a contract. Ms. Bennett, Arya, I want to be very clear about something. This arrangement will work only if we're both completely honest with each other. No pretense, no performance when it's just us. Can you do that? I think so. Can you? Yes, I've had enough of pretense to last a lifetime. They discussed logistics like business partners finalizing a deal. She would finish her semester. They would have a small ceremony at the courthouse. She would move into his home immediately after. He would introduce her to Mila the weekend before the wedding. One last thing, Victor said before they disconnected. I know this isn't conventional. I know you're giving up a great deal. I want you to know I don't take that lightly. You're paying me $5 million. I think you're taking it seriously enough. The money is compensation, not gratitude. Those are different things. Arya didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing. The next 2 weeks passed in a strange blur of finals and paperwork, and increasingly panicked calls from her roommate, who couldn't understand why Arya was dropping out to get married to someone she'd just met. This is cult behavior, her roommate insisted. This is exactly how cults recruit people. Promise them security, isolate them from their support systems, make them dependent. It's not a cult. It's a contractual arrangement. That's what cult members always say. Arya couldn't entirely disagree. But she'd made her choice, and she'd studied enough game theory to know that second-guessing a decision after the die was cast was just another form of self-sabotage. The weekend before the wedding, Victor drove to Seattle to introduce her to Mila. They met at a neutral location, a quiet cafe near the university that served excellent pastries and had a children's section with books and puzzles. Mila Callahan was small for 8, with her father's dark hair and a watchful quality that reminded Arya of shelter cats, assessing whether humans were trustworthy. She wore jeans and a purple sweater and high-top sneakers that were muddy at the toes. "Mila, this is Arya Bennett," Victor said, his hand resting gently on his daughter's shoulder. "I told you we were meeting someone important today." "Hello," Mila said quietly. "Hi." Arya crouched down slightly, trying to be less intimidating. "Your dad said you like to draw?" A tiny nod. "What do you like to draw?" "Animals, mostly. And trees." "Real animals or imaginary ones?" Mila considered this seriously. "Both. Real ones are easier, but imaginary ones are more interesting." "That makes sense. Real things have rules you have to follow. Imaginary things, you get to make the rules yourself." Something shifted in Mila's expression. Not quite a smile, but a softening. "Exactly." They sat at a corner table. Victor ordered coffee for himself and Arya, hot chocolate for Mila. The cafe buzzed with quiet conversation around them. "Mila," Victor said carefully, "I told you that Arya and I have been getting to know each other, that we've been talking about the future." Mila looked between them with those dark, assessing eyes. "We're going to get married," Victor continued, "which means Arya is going to come live with us." Silence. Mila took a sip of her hot chocolate, leaving a small mustache of foam on her upper lip. "When?" "Next weekend." "That's fast." "It is," Victor agreed, "but sometimes when you meet the right person, you know fairly quickly." Mila looked at Arya with an expression far too knowing for an 8-year-old. "Is this because of Grandma and Grandpa Ashford?" Victor's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "It's because I care about Arya, and I think she'll be a good addition to our family. But it's also because of the custody thing." It wasn't a question. Victor glanced at Arya, then back to his daughter. "Yes, it's also because of that." "Okay." Mila returned her attention to her hot chocolate. "I just wanted you to be honest." Arya felt something twist in her chest. "Mila, can I be honest with you about something?" The girl looked up. "I'm not trying to replace your mom. I can't do that, and I wouldn't try. But I'm going to be living in your house, and I'm going to be married to your dad, so we're going to be family in a way. I'd like us to at least be friends, if that's okay with you." "What if I don't want to be friends?" "Then we'll figure out how to live together respectfully anyway. But I think friends would be better, easier." Mila studied her for a long moment. "Do you actually want to marry my dad, or is this just about money?" "Mila," Victor started, but Arya held up a hand. "It's a fair question." She met the girl's eyes directly. "Your dad and I have an arrangement that benefits both of us. He needs a stable family situation for the custody case. I need some things too. So yes, it's partially about practical things like money and legal situations. But I'm not lying to him or to you about what this is. We're being honest with each other." "Grown-ups usually aren't that honest." "I know, but your dad and I decided honesty is more important than pretending." Mila absorbed this, then looked at Victor. "Do you actually like her?" "I respect her," Victor said carefully. "I think she's intelligent and capable and principled. Those are good qualities in a person." "But do you like her?" "I like her well enough. We're not in love, Mila. This isn't that kind of marriage. But we're going to be partners, and I think we'll be good partners." The girl processed this with a seriousness that made Arya's chest ache. Finally, Mila nodded. "Okay, I can work with that." "You can work with it?" Victor's mouth twitched slightly. "It's better than lying. Grandma and Grandpa lie all the time. They say they just want what's best for me, but really, they want what makes them feel better about Mom being gone." She took another sip of hot chocolate. "At least you're both being real." They spent another hour at the cafe. Mila showed Arya some drawings she'd brought in her backpack. Intricate sketches of wolves and ravens and impossible trees with branches that turned into roots that turned into rivers. They were remarkable, genuinely talented work. "These are beautiful," Arya said. "They're okay. I'm still learning perspective. Perspective is hard. I took an art class freshman year and could never get it right. Dad says practice makes better. Not perfect, just better." "Your dad sounds smart." Mila looked at Victor with something fierce and protective in her expression. "He is, and he's a good dad. The Ashfords don't understand that." When it was time to leave, Mila surprised Arya by hugging her briefly. Quick and awkward, but genuine. "Thanks for being honest," the girl whispered. "Thanks for giving me a chance," Arya whispered back. In the parking lot, after Mila was buckled into Victor's Range Rover, Victor turned to Arya. "That went better than I expected. She's remarkable, scary smart. She's had to grow up too fast. The grief, the custody situation, it's forced her to develop coping mechanisms most adults don't have. She's going to see right through any pretense." "I know, which is why honesty is our only option." He paused. "Are you still certain about this?" Arya looked at the Range Rover where Mila sat reading a book, her small face serious in concentration. "Ask me again in 10 years. "Fair enough?" He extended his hand. "I'll see you at the courthouse next Saturday." They shook hands like business partners sealing a deal, because that's exactly what they were. The courthouse ceremony took 11 minutes. Arya wore a simple cream dress her mother had insisted on buying, though Claire Bennett's hands had shaken so badly the salesperson had to help with the credit card. Victor wore the same charcoal suit he'd worn to her father's birthday party, or one identical to it. The officiant was a tired-looking woman in her 50s who'd clearly performed hundreds of these perfunctory ceremonies and had long since stopped investing emotional energy in them. "Do you, Victor James Callahan, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." "Do you, Arya Marie Bennett, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Arya looked at Victor's calm, neutral expression and thought about game theory, about rational actors making calculated decisions in impossible situations. "I do." "Then by the power vested in me by the state of Washington, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss if you'd like." They didn't kiss. They shook hands instead, and the officiant's eyebrows rose slightly before she turned to process the paperwork. Arya's parents stood as witnesses, her mother dabbing at tears that seemed equal parts relief and grief. Her father looked 10 years younger than he had 2 weeks ago. The weight of financial catastrophe finally lifted from his shoulders. Mila hadn't attended. Victor had decided it would be too much, too strange. She was spending the day with a family friend who had a daughter her age and a golden retriever named Captain. Victor had promised they'd do something special as a family once Arya moved in, once things settled into whatever shape they were going to take. The marriage certificate was signed and notarized. Victor's attorney produced additional documents, updated insurance policies, updated will provisions, legal authorizations that made Arya officially part of the Callahan household structure. She signed where indicated, her hand steady despite the surreal weight of what she was doing. Mrs. Arya Callahan. It looked strange on paper, like a name belonging to someone else entirely. Afterward, there was an awkward lunch at a restaurant near the courthouse. Her parents kept trying to make conversation about the future, about plans, about when Arya and Victor might visit. Victor handled it with the same professional courtesy he probably used with difficult clients, deflecting personal questions and steering conversation toward neutral topics. "We should get going," he said finally, glancing at his watch. "I told Mila we'd be back by 3. In the parking garage, Arya's mother hugged her tightly. "Call me when you're settled. Let me know you're all right." "I'll be fine, Mom. I know this isn't what you imagined for yourself. But Victor seems like a good man, stable, kind." "He's both those things," Arya agreed, which was true even if it wasn't the whole truth. Her father shook Victor's hand with the enthusiasm of a man greeting his salvation. "Take care of her. She's precious to us." "I understand." Victor's expression gave nothing away, but Arya caught something flash through his eyes. Not quite judgment, but something close to it. He knew exactly how precious she'd been when they were willing to let her marry a stranger to solve their financial crisis. The drive to Victor's home took 90 minutes. heading east from Seattle into the foothills of the Cascades. They left the city's sprawl behind, trading traffic and strip malls for dense forest and winding mountain roads. Victor drove with the same calm competence he seemed to apply to everything, navigating the curves without apparent effort. "Tell me about the house," Arya said, more to break the silence than from curiosity. "It's about 4,000 square feet, 3 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, office, library, studio space that was Caroline's. Sits on 15 acres, mostly wooded. We're 20 minutes from the nearest town, 45 from anything you'd call a city. Isolated." "Yes, that's part of what the Ashfords object to. They think Mila should be raised in a community, surrounded by other children and social opportunities." He glanced at her briefly. "In reality, she attends a small private school 15 minutes away. She has friends. We're not hermits, but we do value privacy." "Do you miss the city?" "No. I grew up in Seattle, spent 15 years building my business there. When Caroline got sick, we moved out here because she wanted space and quiet. After she died, I considered moving back. But Mila loves it here. She needs the stability." They climbed higher into the mountains. Through gaps in the trees, Arya caught glimpses of distant peaks still holding snow despite the late spring warmth. The air smelled different here, pine and clean water and something wild that the city never had. "What should I expect when we arrive?" she asked. "Mila will be curious but cautious. She'll test boundaries to see what's real and what's performance. She's been through enough disappointment to be skeptical of new people. She seemed to handle our cafe meeting well. She liked that you were honest with her. Children her age are often remarkably perceptive about authenticity." He slowed for a sharp curve. "I should tell you, she still has nightmares sometimes. About her mother, about the hospital. She'll come to my room in the middle of the night and sleep on the floor beside the bed." "That's heartbreaking." "It's getting better, less frequent, but grief doesn't follow a schedule." The house appeared suddenly as they rounded a final curve, a sprawling structure of wood and stone that seemed to grow organically from the mountainside. Large windows reflected the surrounding forest. A wraparound deck offered views of the valley below. It was beautiful in an understated way, the kind of wealth that didn't need to announce itself. Victor pulled into a garage that housed 2 other vehicles, a practical SUV and something sleek and low that was probably wildly impractical on mountain roads. He killed the engine and sat for a moment, his hand still on the wheel. "Last chance," he said quietly. "If you want to change your mind, we can have the marriage annulled. You keep the debt payment. No questions asked." Arya looked at him in surprise. "Why would you offer that now?" "Because the reality of this arrangement might be different from the theory. You're about to walk into a stranger's home and start living a life you didn't choose. I want you to know you still have the option to walk away. You'd lose your strongest defense against the custody challenge. I'd find another way." He turned to look at her directly. "I meant what I said about choice, Arya. This only works if you're here voluntarily." She thought about her dorm room and her international relations textbooks and the life she'd been planning before everything imploded. She thought about her parents' desperate relief and the $5 million waiting at the end of 10 years. She thought about a serious 8-year-old girl who'd lost her mother and might lose her father too. "I'm not walking away," she said. "All right then." He opened his door. "Welcome home." The interior of the house matched the exterior. Natural materials, clean lines, spaces that felt lived in rather than staged. A stone fireplace dominated the main living area. Bookshelves lined one wall, packed with everything from business texts to fantasy novels to children's picture books. Through a wall of windows, the forest pressed close, and Arya could see a deer browsing in the undergrowth. "Arya's here!" Mila's voice called from somewhere upstairs, followed by the thunder of small feet on stairs. The girl appeared in jeans and a paint-stained t-shirt, her dark hair pulled into a messy ponytail. She stopped at the bottom of the stairs, suddenly uncertain. "Hi," Arya said. "Hi." Mila looked between her and Victor. "So you actually did it? Got married?" "We did." "That's weird." Victor set down Arya's suitcases. "Weird how?" "Just weird. Yesterday you were Dad's friend or whatever, and now you're married and living here." She turned to Arya. "Are you going to change everything? Mom's friend Rebecca got remarried and her new husband made her kids get rid of all their old furniture and paint everything gray." I'm not planning to paint anything gray, Arya said. This is your home, Mila. I'm just joining it. What about Mom's studio? Are you going to use it? No, Victor said firmly. That space stays as it is. Mila's shoulders relaxed slightly. Okay, good. She studied Arya with those two knowing eyes. You want to see your room? Sure. The girl led her upstairs and down a hallway lined with family photographs. Caroline and Victor on what was probably their wedding day, Mila as a baby, vacation photos from beaches and mountains. Arya tried not to stare at the images of the woman whose place she was theoretically taking, but she couldn't help noticing Caroline's warm smile and the easy way she leaned into Victor in the photos. They'd looked genuinely happy. This had been a real marriage, a real family, and now Arya was supposed to somehow fit into the space Caroline had left behind. This is you. Mila opened a door to reveal a spacious bedroom with its own bathroom and a window seat overlooking the forest. The furniture was simple but high quality, a queen bed with a white duvet, a desk, a comfortable reading chair. Dad had it cleaned and everything. The closet's empty so you can put your stuff wherever. It's beautiful, thank you. Dad's room is at the end of the hall. Mine's the one with the space stickers on the door. Mom's studio is downstairs, but we don't go in there. She rattled this off matter-of-factly, a tour guide reciting established facts. Do you need help unpacking? I can manage, but I appreciate the offer. Mila lingered in the doorway. Can I ask you something? Of course. Are you scared? The question caught Arya off guard. Of what? Of this. All of it. Moving in with people you don't know, being married to Dad, having the Ashfords hate you because you're helping us. Arya sat on the edge of the bed. Yeah, I'm pretty scared. But you're doing it anyway. Sometimes you have to do scary things because the alternative is worse. Mila absorbed this, nodding slowly. Mom used to say that brave isn't not being afraid. It's being afraid and doing it anyway. Your mom sounds like she was smart. She was. The girl's voice went quiet. She was really smart and kind, and she made the best chocolate chip pancakes. She looked up, her eyes suddenly fierce. I don't want you to try to be like her. That would be weird and fake. I wouldn't even know how to try. I can't make chocolate chip pancakes to save my life. A tiny smile. Really? Really. I once set off the fire alarm in my dorm trying to make regular pancakes. They turned into charcoal. That's actually impressive, in a bad way. I have many skills. Cooking is not one of them. Dad's okay at cooking. Not great, but okay. We mostly do simple stuff. Pasta, stir-fry. Sometimes we order pizza. I can handle pizza. Mila's smile widened slightly. Okay, that's good. She turned to leave, then paused. Arya? Thanks for not being fake. A lot of adults would pretend this is all normal and perfect. I like that you admitted you're scared. After she left, Arya sat in the quiet room and tried to process the reality of what she'd done. 20 years old, married to a man she barely knew, living in a mountain house with a grieving child who was already perceptive enough to see through any pretense. She unpacked slowly, hanging clothes in the empty closet and arranging her few possessions on the desk. Her textbooks looked out of place in this adult bedroom, reminders of the college life she'd put on hold. Victor had promised she could continue her studies remotely, taking online courses and occasional trips to campus for required in-person components. But it wouldn't be the same. Nothing would be the same. A knock on the doorframe made her turn. Victor stood there, still in his suit, though he'd loosened his tie. Getting settled? As much as possible. I should show you the practical things. Kitchen, laundry, alarm codes. And we should discuss schedules. They spent the next hour going over the logistics of daily life. Victor worked primarily from his home office, with occasional trips to Seattle for meetings. Mila's school ran until 3:30, and she had art lessons on Tuesdays and Thursdays. There was a housekeeper who came twice a week, a woman named Patricia who'd worked for the family for 5 years and knew to give them space. Victor handled most of the cooking but wouldn't object if Arya wanted to contribute, though her admission about the fire alarm made him smile slightly. What about expectations? Arya asked as they stood in the kitchen. You said we'd maintain separate bedrooms, but what about everything else? Do we eat dinner together? Are there specific times you need me to be available for appearances? We should eat dinner together as a family most nights. It's important for Mila's sense of stability. Beyond that, I won't monitor your time. You're free to pursue your studies, explore the area, maintain your own interests. I ask only that you be present for key social events. The custody hearing, obviously, and perhaps a few business functions where appearing as a couple would be beneficial. An affection? In public or in front of Mila? He considered this. Nothing that would make either of us uncomfortable. We don't need to perform passion, but perhaps, he hesitated, choosing words carefully, perhaps we should at least appear comfortable with each other. A hand on the arm, standing close enough to suggest familiarity. Small gestures that indicate this is a genuine partnership. We should practice. His eyebrows rose. Practice? You said it yourself. We need to appear comfortable. Right now we're standing a very precise 3 feet apart, and you look like you're negotiating a contract. If we're supposed to convince a judge we're a real couple, we need to be able to stand in the same room without broadcasting that we're strangers. Victor looked down at the space between them, then back up at her face. You're right. That's actually very practical thinking. I study diplomacy. Body language matters. All right then. He stepped closer, closing the distance between them to something more appropriate for people who allegedly shared a life. How's this? Better. But you're standing like you're at a business conference. Relax your shoulders. He made a visible effort to soften his posture. Arya stepped closer still, close enough to smell his cologne, something subtle and woody. She placed a hand lightly on his forearm, the gesture casual and easy. There, she said. That looks more natural. Victor glanced down at her hand, then at her face. You're good at this. I've spent 2 years studying how people communicate non-verbally. It's like learning a language. She removed her hand. We should probably practice in front of Mila too. Let her get used to seeing us act like a couple. She's already suspicious. She told me this morning that we shake hands too much for married people. Arya laughed despite herself. She's not wrong. No, she's rarely wrong about anything. He leaned against the counter, his posture finally relaxing into something more natural. How are you really doing with all this? Honest answer. Honestly, I feel like I'm in someone else's life. Like I'm playing a role in a movie and any moment someone's going to yell, cut, and I'll go back to my dorm room. She wrapped her arms around herself. But also, it's not as terrible as I thought it might be. The house is beautiful. Mila is remarkable. You're easier to be around than I expected. What did you expect? I don't know. Someone colder, maybe. More controlling. You're very contained, but you're not cruel. I try not to be. Cruelty is inefficient. He said it seriously, and she couldn't tell if he was joking. Is that why you were so adamant about paying the debt first? Efficiency? Partly, but also... He paused, seeming to choose his words with care. I watched my wife die over the course of 18 months. Watched her become smaller and weaker and lose pieces of herself day by day. The one thing that mattered to her at the end was knowing Mila would be all right. She made me promise I'd fight for our daughter, keep her safe and with me. I'm sorry. That must have been impossible. It was clarifying. Grief has a way of burning away everything that doesn't matter and leaving only what's essential. What's essential is Mila's well-being. Everything else, including my own comfort or convenience, is secondary. He met her eyes directly. I don't want you to feel trapped here, Arya. That wouldn't serve anyone. So yes, I paid the debt first because it was efficient, but also because trapping you would have made me the kind of person Caroline wouldn't have recognized. The honesty of it struck her silent for a moment. You really loved her. I did. Very much. And you don't resent me for being here in her place? You're not in her place. Her place no longer exists. She's gone. You're in a different place, serving a different function. There's no replacement happening. It should have sounded cold, that clinical distinction, but somehow it didn't. It sounded like someone who'd thought deeply about grief and come out the other side with clear eyes and careful boundaries. What happens if this doesn't work? Arya asked. If the judge sees through us, or if I can't do this the way you need me to? Then we'll deal with that if it happens. But I don't believe in borrowing trouble from hypothetical futures. He pushed off from the counter. Come on, I'll show you the trail around the property. Mila likes to hike it most evenings before dinner. They found Mila in the garage, lacing up hiking boots. She looked between them with that assessing gaze. You guys were talking for a long time. Getting to know each other, Victor said easily. Arya's coming on the evening walk. Do you even have hiking boots? Mila asked Arya. I have sneakers. The girl looked at Arya's feet dubiously. The trail gets muddy. But I guess sneakers are okay if you don't mind them getting dirty. The trail wound through dense forest, following a small creek that chattered over rocks. Mila led the way with the confidence of someone who'd walked this path hundreds of times. Victor followed, and Arya brought up the rear, trying not to slip on the occasional muddy patch. There's a deer that comes to the meadow sometimes, Mila called back. A doe. Mom used to draw her all the time. What's the meadow? Arya asked. You'll see. They emerged from the trees into a clearing carpeted with wildflowers just beginning to bloom. The meadow sloped gently upward, and at its far edge stood a massive old cedar tree with branches that spread like a natural cathedral. This is beautiful, Arya said. Mom loved it here. Mila walked to the cedar tree and pressed her hand against its trunk. She said trees remember everything, all the seasons, all the people who walked past them. She said this tree was probably 100 years old, maybe more. Victor stood beside his daughter, his hand joining hers on the bark. She had her ashes scattered here, under this tree. Arya hung back, giving them space. The late afternoon sun slanted through the branches, and she could understand why someone would choose this place for their final rest. It was peaceful in a way that felt earned rather than forced, genuine rather than staged. Come here, Mila said, gesturing to Arya. You should meet the tree. Meet the tree? It's our family tree now. That's what Mom called it. So if you're family, you should meet it. Arya walked over and placed her hand on the trunk beside Mila's and Victor's. The bark was rough and warm from the sun, and she could feel the solid life of the tree underneath, the slow, patient existence of something that had stood here long before any of them were born, and would likely stand here long after. Hi, tree, she said quietly, feeling slightly ridiculous but unwilling to dismiss what was clearly important to Mila. She used to talk to it, Mila said. Mom, she'd tell it about her day, about what she was working on. I thought it was weird at first, but then I tried it and it actually helps. The tree doesn't judge or give advice or try to fix anything. It just listens. They stood there together, three people who'd been strangers 2 weeks ago, their hands on the bark of a cedar tree that had witnessed a century of seasons. A light breeze moved through the clearing, carrying the scent of pine and wildflowers. We should head back, Victor said finally. It'll be dark soon. On the walk back, Mila peppered Arya with questions about college, about her classes, about what she'd been studying before everything changed. Arya answered honestly, describing her international relations program and her fascination with how conflicts could be resolved through negotiation rather than force. That's kind of what you and Dad did, right? Mila said. Negotiated instead of fighting? I suppose so. We found a solution that worked for both of us. Grandma and Grandpa Ashford don't negotiate. They just demand things and expect people to agree. Some people think power means never having to compromise, Arya said carefully, but usually those people end up isolated. That's what Dad says too, that the Ashfords have money and connections but not many real friends. Victor glanced back at her with something like approval in his expression. Dinner was simple. Pasta with marinara sauce, salad from a bag, bread that Victor admitted came from the freezer section. They sat at a wooden table that showed the ware of daily use, and Mila dominated the conversation with stories about her day with her friend Katie and Captain the Golden Retriever. Katie's mom said Captain is getting old, Mila said, twirling pasta on her fork. He's 9, which is like 63 in dog years. She said we should appreciate him while he's still here, because dogs don't live forever. That's true, Victor said, but 9 isn't that old for a Golden Retriever. He probably has several more years. Still, it made me sad. Mila looked down at her plate. Everything dies eventually. Yes, Victor said quietly, but everything lives first. Captain's had a good life with people who love him. That's worth something. I guess. After dinner, Mila retreated to her room to work on homework. Arya helped Victor clean up, falling into an easy rhythm of washing and drying dishes. Through the window above the sink, darkness gathered in the forest. She's processing a lot, Victor said, handing Arya a plate to dry. The conversation about the dog dying. That's really about Caroline. I figured. She goes through phases. Some days she seems fine, almost her old self. Other days the grief hits her out of nowhere and she shuts down completely. That seems normal, healthy even. Her therapist agrees, but it's hard to watch. He scrubbed at a pot with more force than necessary. I can handle business challenges, negotiate complex deals, solve problems that seem impossible, but I can't fix this for her. I can't bring her mother back. No, but you can be present while she figures out how to live with the loss. That matters. He looked at her with something like surprise. You're very wise for 20. I'm very good at sounding wise. There's a difference. I don't think there is. Not really. They finished the dishes in companionable silence. Arya found herself surprisingly comfortable in this domestic rhythm, the simple task of cleaning up after dinner while evening settled over the mountain house. I should work for a few hours, Victor said, drying his hands. I have calls with the East Coast in the morning and need to review some contracts. You're welcome to use the library if you want quiet space for studying. I might just read in my room, get used to being here. All right. If you need anything, I'm in the office downstairs. Just knock. Arya climbed the stairs to her new room and changed into comfortable clothes, yoga pants and a soft sweatshirt. She tried to focus on reading for her online course on international security policy, but her mind kept wandering to the strangeness of her situation. She was married. She lived in a mountain house. She had a stepdaughter who talked to trees and asked devastatingly perceptive questions. This was her life now. Around 10, she heard Mila's door open and small footsteps padding down the hall. A soft knock on her doorframe made her look up from her textbook. Can I come in? Mila asked. Sure. The girl entered and sat cross-legged on the floor beside Arya's bed. I can't sleep. Something bothering you? I keep thinking about what happens at the custody hearing if they ask me questions. What kind of questions? Like if I'm happy here, if Dad takes good care of me, if I want to live with Grandma and Grandpa instead. She picked at the hem of her pajama pants. They'll probably ask about you too, about whether you're a good stepmom or whatever. What will you say? I don't know yet. I don't really know you. She looked up, her dark eyes serious. But I know you're honest. And I know you and Dad have an arrangement that makes sense for both of you. Is that enough? Enough for what? To tell the judge that you're not trying to replace Mom, but you're here and you're helping and it's working okay. Arya set her textbook aside and slid down to sit on the floor beside Mila. Listen, I can't tell you what to say at the hearing. That has to be completely your choice. But I can tell you that I'm going to do my best to be a good presence in your life. I won't pretend to be your mom. I won't try to change everything about your home. But I'll be honest with you, and I'll try to help make things stable and okay. Even though it's just an arrangement? Even though you don't have to care? I might not have to care, Arya said slowly, working it out as she spoke. But that doesn't mean I won't. Caring isn't always a choice you make consciously. Sometimes it just happens because you're sharing space with someone and they matter. Mila leaned against her slightly, a small gesture of trust that made Arya's chest ache. Katie's mom said her husband, Katie's stepdad, is the best dad she could ask for. She said you don't have to be blood to be family. That's true. So maybe this could work, the arrangement. Maybe it could turn into something real. Maybe it could. They sat together in comfortable silence. Through the window, Arya could see stars scattered across the clear mountain sky, more than she'd ever seen from the city. I should try to sleep again, Mila said finally. But thanks for talking. Any time. The girl stood and walked to the door, then turned back. Arya, I'm glad you said yes to the arrangement. I think it was brave. After she left, Arya sat on the floor for a long time, staring at nothing in particular. She'd entered this marriage thinking it was a simple transaction, debt, forgiveness, and financial security, in exchange for legal legitimacy and strategic positioning, a rational solution to impossible circumstances. But Mila's quiet trust, Victor's careful honesty, the rhythm of dinner and dishes and evening walks, it was all starting to feel like something more complex than a business arrangement. It was starting to feel like the beginning of something she couldn't quite name yet, something that might, despite all logic and intention, turn into something real. The week settled into patterns that felt almost natural, which was perhaps the strangest part of all. Arya woke each morning to the sound of birds she couldn't identify and sunlight filtering through pine branches. She'd make coffee in the quiet kitchen while Victor worked in his office, and Mila prepared for school with the methodical efficiency of someone who'd learned early that routine provided safety. Breakfast became their first test of appearing like a real family. Victor would emerge from his office exactly at 7:15, still in pajama pants, but already checking his phone for overnight messages. Mila would appear moments later with her backpack already organized, her homework double-checked, her anxieties temporarily contained by morning structure. "Did you sleep?" Victor asked Arya on the fourth morning, his tone casual, but his eyes assessing. "Mostly. The quiet takes getting used to. No traffic, no sirens, no drunk students singing at 2 in the morning. Is that what happens in dorms?" Mila asked, spreading peanut butter on toast with focused concentration. "Sometimes. College students aren't always known for their excellent decision-making." "Were you a drunk student who sang?" "I was a scholarship student who studied too much and worried about money constantly. Not nearly as fun." Victor poured coffee for both of them, the gesture so domestic that Arya had to remind herself this was performance, practice, for the custody hearing. Except it didn't feel like performance anymore. It felt like Victor Callahan was someone who noticed when people needed coffee and provided it without making a production of the kindness. "I have to go to Seattle tomorrow," he said, settling into the chair beside Arya's rather than across from her. She noticed the choice, the way he was slowly closing the physical distance between them in Mila's presence. "Meetings with potential investors for a Portland property. I'll be gone overnight." "Okay." Arya tried to sound like this was normal information rather than mildly panic-inducing. She'd been in the house less than a week, and now Victor would be gone, and she'd be responsible for an 8-year-old she barely knew. "Patricia will be here during the day," Victor continued, "and I'll be available by phone, but Mila has art lessons tomorrow after school, and she'll need dinner and help with homework if she has any." "I can handle art lessons and dinner." "Can you?" Mila looked skeptical. "You admitted you can't cook." "I can order pizza and drive you to art lessons. Those are valuable skills." "They're okay skills," Mila conceded. "Not great skills, but okay." Victor's mouth twitched in what might have been amusement. "I'll leave emergency numbers on the counter, and Arya, if anything feels overwhelming, call me. I can be back in 90 minutes. "We'll be fine," Arya said with more confidence than she felt. After Victor left with Mila for the school drop-off, Arya stood alone in the too-quiet house and wondered what she'd gotten herself into. The smart move would be to use the time to study, to focus on her online coursework and maintain some connection to the life she'd planned. But instead she found herself wandering through the house like a ghost, trying to understand the family whose space she now occupied. The living room was lived in but not cluttered, books everywhere, as Victor had promised. She scanned the titles. Business theory next to fantasy novels, next to thick art books and collections of poetry. A chess set sat on a side table, the pieces arranged mid-game like someone had been interrupted and planned to return. Children's drawings covered the refrigerator, held by magnets from various national parks. Most were Mila's. Those intricate sketches of impossible animals and dream-logic forests. But a few were different, softer, rendered in a more mature hand. Caroline's work probably, the woman whose ghost lived in every corner of this house. Arya opened the fridge and found it well stocked with actual food, not the bachelor refrigerator of condiments and takeout containers she'd half expected. Someone, Victor or possibly Patricia, maintained a household that functioned, milk that wasn't expired, fresh vegetables, cheese that wasn't growing science experiments. She made herself examine Caroline's studio, even though Victor had said they didn't go in there. The door wasn't locked. The room beyond was exactly what she'd expected. North-facing windows for good light, an easel with a half-finished canvas, shelves of art supplies, organized with the same precision Victor applied to everything else in his life. The painting on the easel showed the cedar tree from the meadow, rendered in oils that had long since dried. Caroline had been talented, genuinely so. The tree seemed to breathe on the canvas. Arya backed out and closed the door quietly, feeling like an intruder. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother asking how she was settling in, if everything was all right, if she needed anything. The subtext was clear. Was Victor treating her well? Was she regretting the arrangement? Did she want to come home? Arya typed out a response that was true without being complete. Everything's fine. The house is beautiful. Mila is adjusting. All facts, none of them lies, but none of them capturing the strange reality of her new existence. She spent the afternoon studying international security policy and trying not to think about the custody hearing that was now 3 weeks away. Victor's attorney had sent over preparation materials, likely questions, appropriate responses, the strategic framing they needed to present. The Ashfords would argue that Mila needed stability, community, the resources and social connections that only they could provide. Victor's defense was that Mila had stability, that she was thriving in her current environment with a parent who loved her, and now a two-parent household that provided everything a child needed. Arya was the wild card, the piece that could strengthen or destroy their entire case. A 20-year-old bride married less than a month to a man 20 years her senior. It looked, she had to admit, exactly like what it was. A strategic arrangement designed to counter a custody challenge. The question was whether they could make it look legitimate enough to convince a family court judge. When Victor returned with Mila that afternoon, the girl headed straight for her room to change out of school clothes. Victor joined Arya in the kitchen where she was attempting to figure out dinner options. "How was your day?" he asked. "Quiet. I studied. Didn't burn the house down." "That's an improvement over your pancake attempts." "I'm growing as a person." He smiled, the expression transforming his face from austere to almost warm. "Mila had a good day at school. She told me at pickup that having you here made coming home less—" He paused, searching for the right word. "Less empty." She said that? Not in those exact words, but that was the meaning. He leaned against the counter, closer than he would have stood a week ago. They were both learning this choreography of manufactured intimacy. "I meant what I said about calling me tomorrow if you need anything, but I also think you'll be fine. You're more capable than you give yourself credit for." "How do you know? You barely know me." "I know you negotiated your way into this arrangement with clear eyes and logical reasoning. I know you're pursuing a degree in one of the more intellectually demanding fields. I know Mila has opened up to you more in 4 days than she did to my sister over 6 months. Those aren't the qualities of someone who can't handle an evening alone with an 8-year-old. Arya studied him. This man who noticed details and paid attention and seemed to actually mean the rare compliments he offered. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect? Someone more, I don't know, ruthless, maybe? You approached this whole thing so strategically, so calculated. I thought you'd be cold." "Strategy doesn't preclude warmth. Calculation doesn't mean cruelty." He turned to face her fully. "I loved my wife, Arya, very much. When she died, I had to choose between drowning in grief or channeling it into protecting what remained, our daughter. I chose protection. That requires clear thinking, yes. Strategy, yes. But it doesn't require being cold, just focused." "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to imply it. I know, and you're right to be cautious. We're still strangers in many ways. But I want you to understand that this arrangement, however it began, is something I take seriously. You're not just a chess piece. You're a person who's disrupted her entire life to help my family. That matters to me." Before Arya could respond, Mila's voice called from upstairs. "Are we having dinner or what? I'm starving." "We're ordering pizza," Arya called back. "With pepperoni? Is there any other kind?" Victor's smile returned, softer this time. "You're going to be fine tomorrow." The next day proved him right, though not without challenges. The art lessons were easy. Arya simply had to drive Mila to a small studio in town and wait while a patient woman named Ms. Chen guided her through watercolor techniques. But dinner turned into a negotiation when Mila announced she was supposed to be working on a project about family heritage. "It's for social studies," Mila explained, spreading her notes across the kitchen table. "We have to interview family members and make a presentation about where we came from." "That sounds interesting." "It's complicated." Mila chewed her pencil, a habit that had probably driven Caroline crazy. "I interviewed Dad last week. He told me about his grandparents coming from Ireland and his mom's family being here since forever. But I'm supposed to interview other family members too." "What about your mom's side?" Mila's face closed slightly. "The Ashfords. They have this whole thing about their family being founders of Bellevue and having all this history. Grandma Helen sent me a packet about it. 20 pages. She made a face. It's all about money and property and important people they knew, nothing about actual human things. What do you want to put in your presentation? I don't know. The true stuff, I guess. Like how Mom used to paint and she taught me to see light and shadow. How Dad built his business from nothing and he works really hard, but he still makes time for dinner. How Grandma Helen smells like expensive perfume and makes me sit up straight. And Grandpa Jonathan talks about legacy and responsibility like those are the only things that matter. She looked up at Arya. Can I interview you? Me? I've only been here a week. But you're family now, legally. That counts, right? Arya sat down across from her, pushing aside the pizza boxes. What do you want to know? Where does your family come from? My dad's side is English and German, pretty boring. My mom's family came from Poland originally, then moved to New York in the 20s. My grandmother used to tell stories about growing up in Brooklyn during the Depression, about how people helped each other because nobody had anything. That's more interesting than property records. Mila wrote this down carefully. What matters to your family? Like, what do they value? Arya thought about her parents' desperate relief when the debt was paid, about her mother's forced optimism and her father's reckless gambles. Education, I guess. Making something of yourself, though they also value security and status, which sometimes contradicts the other things. That's honest. You asked for the truth. Most adults don't give it. Mila tapped her pencil against the notebook. What do you value, like personally, not your family? Honesty, keeping your word, trying to solve problems without making them worse. She paused. Courage, maybe. The kind where you do something scary because it's the right choice even when you're not sure it is. Like marrying Dad to help with the custody thing. Yeah, like that. Mila absorbed this, her serious face considering. One more question. Do you think family is just about blood, or is it more than that? I think blood gives you relatives, but family is about who shows up, who stays, who chooses you and keeps choosing you even when it's hard. Arya met the girl's eyes. I think family is something you build, not just something you inherit. Write that down, Mila said, pushing the notebook toward her. That's good. I want to use it in my presentation. They worked on the project together until Mila's bedtime, organizing her research into something coherent. Arya found herself enjoying it, the simple task of helping a child with homework, the way Mila's face lit up when they found the right way to express an idea. This was what normal families did. This was what she'd signed up to perform, but was somehow actually experiencing. When Victor called to check in around 9, Arya could honestly report that everything was fine. Better than fine, actually. They'd survived dinner and homework and bedtime without crisis. See, Victor said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. I told you that you were capable. Don't get too confident. I still can't cook anything that doesn't come in a delivery box. That's what Patricia is for. And me, when I'm home. How are your meetings going? Productively. The investors are interested. I should be able to close the deal by next month. He paused. Thank you, Arya, for being there with Mila, for taking this seriously. It's literally what you're paying me for. Yes, but you could be doing the minimum required, and instead you're helping her with homework and letting her interview you for school projects. That's more than our contract specifies. Arya thought about Mila's question, whether family was blood or choice. She's a good kid, easy to care about. She is. His voice softened. I'll be home tomorrow around 4. We can all have dinner together, as a family. As a family. The phrase should have sounded hollow, a reminder of the performance they were maintaining. Instead, it sounded almost real. The Ashfords made their first appearance 2 days later, arriving in a Mercedes that probably cost more than Arya's college tuition. Helen Ashford was exactly what Arya had pictured. Elegant in that effortless way that only came from generations of money, her silver hair cut in a severe bob, her expression polite but cold. Jonathan Ashford was tall and stern, with the bearing of someone accustomed to boardrooms and deference. They'd called ahead, observing the legal requirements about visitation. Victor had been tense all morning, moving through the house like a general preparing for battle. Mila had retreated into careful composure, her face closed and neutral. You don't have to be here, Victor told Arya an hour before they were scheduled to arrive. I won't put you in the line of fire unnecessarily. If I'm going to be part of this family, I should meet them eventually. Might as well be now. His expression flickered with something that might have been gratitude. They won't be kind. I didn't expect them to be. When the Ashfords arrived, Helen's eyes went immediately to Arya with an assessment that was thorough and dismissive. Jonathan barely acknowledged her existence, focusing instead on Mila with a forced warmth that made the girl shrink slightly. "Mila, darling," Helen said, bending to kiss her granddaughter's cheek. "You look thin. Is your father feeding you properly?" "I eat fine, Grandma." "We should discuss nutrition with Victor. Growing children need proper meals, not whatever bachelor cooking he's managing." "I'm managing quite well," Victor said evenly, "and Arya has been helping with meals." Helen's gaze swung to Arya like a weapon. "Ah, yes, the new wife. How convenient, Victor. Married less than a month before the hearing." "Helen, let's keep this civil," Jonathan said, though his own tone suggested he agreed with his wife's skepticism. "We're here to see Mila, not interrogate Victor's personal choices. Personal choices that directly affect our granddaughter's well-being." Arya had studied enough diplomatic negotiations to recognize a power play when she saw one. Helen was establishing dominance, making it clear that she viewed Arya as an interloper rather than a legitimate family member. The smart move was to remain neutral, to avoid escalating. "Would anyone like coffee?" Arya offered. "Or tea?" "We're fine, thank you," Helen said coldly. She turned back to Mila. "Why don't you show us your room, darling? I'd love to see what you've been working on in art class." Mila glanced at Victor, who nodded. The girl led her grandparents upstairs, leaving Victor and Arya alone in the living room. "That was uncomfortable," Arya said quietly. "That was restrained. Helen can be considerably worse when she wants to be." Victor moved to the window, watching the forest beyond with tight shoulders. "She's gathering ammunition, looking for anything that suggests instability or inappropriate environment. What will she find upstairs?" "A normal 8-year-old's room. Art supplies, books, some stuffed animals Mila won't admit she still sleeps with. Nothing that suggests neglect or harm." He turned back to Arya. "But Helen doesn't need evidence. She needs narrative. And a 20-year-old bride in a rushed marriage provides excellent narrative material. So what do? We present our own narrative. A young woman who's mature beyond her years, who stepped into a complex situation with grace and genuine care for Mila. A marriage that may have developed quickly, but is built on mutual respect and shared commitment to family. How's my performance so far?" "It's not a performance anymore, is it?" He said it quietly, like he was testing the statement. "You offered them coffee. You're nervous about their assessment. You're not doing the minimum required by our contract. You're actually engaged." Before Arya could respond, voices on the stairs announced the Ashfords' return. Helen's expression had shifted slightly, less overtly hostile and more calculatingly curious. "Mila's room is lovely," she said, her tone suggesting the opposite. "Though I notice Caroline's studio remains untouched. Don't you think it's time to move forward, Victor? Keeping a shrine to the past can't be healthy for Mila." "The studio stays as it is," Victor said flatly. "Mila isn't ready to change it, and neither am I. Clinging to grief doesn't help anyone heal. Neither does forcing healing according to someone else's timeline." Jonathan cleared his throat. "We should be going. We have dinner reservations in the city." He nodded at Arya with slightly more warmth than his wife had shown. "It was interesting to meet you, Mrs. Callahan." Mrs. Callahan. The name still felt strange, like a coat that didn't quite fit, but Arya nodded back. Likewise. After they left, Mila emerged from a room where she'd disappeared after bringing her grandparents back downstairs. They didn't like Arya. "They don't like anyone they perceive as interfering with their plans," Victor said. "Grandma asked me if I was happy here, if I felt safe, if I had enough of everything I needed." Mila's voice was matter-of-fact, but her hands were twisting together. She asked if I missed having a mom, if it was hard being alone with just Dad so much. Victor's face went carefully blank. "What did you tell her?" "The truth. That I'm happy here, that you're a good dad, that I have friends and school and everything I need, that I'm not alone anymore because Arya's here now." She looked at Arya. "I said you were nice and honest and you don't try to replace Mom." "Thank you," Arya said quietly. "But Grandma said nice and honest aren't the same as experienced or equipped. She said raising children requires maturity and life experience that a 20-year-old couldn't possibly have. Mila's voice went smaller. She said maybe I'd be better off somewhere with people who know what they're doing. Victor crossed to his daughter and knelt in front of her, his hands on her shoulders. Mila, listen to me. You're not going anywhere unless you want to. This is your home. I'm your parent. And yes, Arya is young, but she's here because she cares about helping our family. The Ashfords don't get to decide what's best for you. I do, in consultation with what you want. What if they convince the judge I should live with them? That's not going to happen. But what if it does? Victor pulled her into a hug, his face pressed against her dark hair. Arya watched this man who presented such careful control to the world crack slightly under the weight of his daughter's fear. Then we'll fight it, he said finally. We'll appeal, we'll keep fighting, we'll do whatever it takes. But I don't believe it will come to that. The judge will see that you're happy and safe and thriving here. After Mila went to bed that night, Arya found Victor in his office, staring at his computer screen without really seeing it. She knocked on the door frame, and he looked up, his expression haggard. Come in. She settled into the chair across from his desk. That was intense. That was reconnaissance. The real battle is still ahead. He rubbed his face tiredly. Helen planted seeds of doubt in Mila's mind. That's what she does. Undermines confidence, suggests alternatives, makes people question their choices. By the custody hearing, she'll have those doubts grown into full arguments about why Mila would be better off in Bellevue. What do we do about it? We keep doing what we're doing, creating stability, building routine, demonstrating that this household functions. We have 3 weeks until the hearing, 3 weeks to make this look as real as possible. Look real or be real? Arya asked. Victor met her eyes. Is there a difference anymore? The question hung between them, unanswered and maybe unanswerable. Arya thought about helping Mila with homework, about morning coffee routines and evening walks to the cedar tree. She thought about how Victor stood close to her now without conscious thought, how she'd started calling this place home in her mind rather than Victor's house. I don't know, she admitted. The lines are getting blurry. Maybe that's not a bad thing, for the custody case at least. And after? When Mila's 18 and the Ashfords aren't a threat anymore? That's 8 years away. Let's survive the next 3 weeks first. But Arya couldn't quite let it go. When you drew up the contract, you must have thought about the endgame, about what happens when this arrangement fulfills its purpose. I thought about protecting my daughter. Everything else was secondary. He leaned back in his chair. Why are you asking? Because I'm starting to wonder if a 10-year contract for something that might become real makes sense. If we're building something genuine, shouldn't it exist outside the confines of legal agreements and financial arrangements? And if it doesn't become real, if it stays exactly what it started as, a mutually beneficial arrangement, then the contract protects both of us. From what? From disappointment, from undefined expectations, from the mess that happens when people mistake performance for reality. Arya stood, suddenly restless. I should let you work. Arya, wait. He stood as well. I didn't mean that the way it sounded. What we're building here, whatever it is, it matters. It's not just performance for the Ashfords, but I also can't promise it's going to evolve into some fairy tale ending. I don't know if I have that in me anymore. I'm not asking for fairy tales. I'm just trying to understand what this is. If I knew, I'd tell you, but I'm navigating this as blindly as you are. He moved around the desk, stopping close enough that she could see the fatigue in his eyes. What I do know is that having you here has made things better. For Mila, yes, but also for me. This house feels less empty, less like a memorial and more like a home. That's something. It is. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the gesture surprisingly intimate. I know this isn't what you planned for your life. I know I've asked you to give up a great deal, but I want you to know it's not taken for granted. His hand lingered near her face, and for a moment Arya thought he might kiss her. She wasn't sure what she wanted him to do. The contract specified separate bedrooms and no romantic expectations, but the space between them felt charged with something that transcended legal agreements. But Victor stepped back, the moment breaking. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's a school day and Mila will want pancakes, which means I'll be cooking because we both know you'd set off the fire alarm. I could learn to make pancakes. Please don't. I've grown attached to this kitchen. I'd rather it not burn down. She left him there in his office, surrounded by contracts and case files and the careful architecture of their defensive strategy. In her room, she lay awake for a long time, thinking about the difference between arrangements and relationships, between strategy and genuine connection. Somewhere down the hall, Mila was probably checking that her door was locked twice before allowing herself to sleep. And in his office, Victor was probably still working, channeling grief and fear into protective action. And Arya was here, caught between the life she'd planned and the life she was actually living, trying to figure out which one felt more real. The answer, she was beginning to suspect, wasn't as clear as she'd hoped it would be. The custody hearing arrived with the weight of inevitability. Like a storm system everyone had watched approach for weeks. Arya woke that morning to find Victor already dressed in a dark suit, sitting at the kitchen table with coffee gone cold and case files spread before him like tarot cards predicting futures. "You didn't sleep," she said. "Not much." He didn't look up from the documents. "I keep running through scenarios. What they'll argue, how we'll counter, what questions the judge might ask." Arya poured herself coffee and sat across from him. She'd chosen her outfit the night before with Victor's attorney, a navy dress that was professional without being severe, modest without looking like she was trying too hard. The goal was to appear mature, stable, appropriate. A woman who could credibly be a stepmother despite being only 20 years old. "Where's Mila?" "Still sleeping. I'm letting her rest as long as possible. Patricia will take her to school and pick her up afterward." His jaw tightened. "I didn't want her missing class and sitting in a courthouse all day waiting to be called." "Is she nervous?" "Terrified. She came to my room at 2 a.m, couldn't sleep. We talked until almost 4. He finally looked up, and Arya saw the exhaustion carved into his features. She asked me what happens if she has to go live with the Ashfords, if they'd let her visit, if she'd ever see this house again. What did you tell her? That it won't come to that. That the judge will see she's happy here, that she's thriving, that disrupting her life would be cruel and unnecessary. He set down the file he'd been studying. I told her what I needed to tell her. Whether it's true remains to be seen. Arya reached across the table and placed her hand over his. The gesture came naturally now, without thought or calculation. Victor's fingers curled around hers, holding on like she was an anchor in uncertain waters. "We're going to be fine," she said. "We've prepared. We know what we're doing." "Do we?" His voice was quiet, almost vulnerable. "I've negotiated million-dollar deals, navigated complex business acquisitions, solved problems that seemed impossible. But this? My daughter's entire future resting on whether a judge believes our marriage is legitimate? I've never felt less certain of anything. The marriage is legitimate. We have a license, shared residence, genuine daily interaction. That's real. But the foundation doesn't matter." Arya squeezed his hand. "Lots of marriages start for practical reasons. Immigration, finances, social pressure. The question isn't why we got married. It's whether the marriage provides Mila with a stable environment. And it does." Victor studied her face like he was seeing something new there. "When did you become the confident one?" "About 30 seconds ago. I'm mostly faking it." That pulled a small smile from him. Brief, but genuine. "You're good at faking confidence. It's almost believable." They drove to the courthouse in Victor's Range Rover, the morning gray and threatening rain. Victor's attorney, a sharp woman named Margaret Chen, who'd been handling custody cases for 20 years, met them in the parking lot. She looked them both over with a critical eye. "Good. You look like a married couple, not two strangers playing dress-up." She gestured them toward the building. "Remember what we discussed. Answer questions directly, but don't volunteer extra information. If they ask about the timeline of your relationship, acknowledge it was quick, but emphasize the genuine connection that developed. Arya, if they question your age or maturity, stay calm. Getting defensive only proves their point." The courtroom was smaller than Arya had expected, more like a conference room than the dramatic spaces she'd seen on television. The Ashfords were already seated with their attorney, a man who looked like he charged $1,000 an hour and enjoyed every minute of it. Helen's expression was cold determination. Jonathan looked almost sad, like he regretted the necessity of this battle, but would prosecute it ruthlessly anyway. The judge was a woman in her 60s named Patricia Thornton, with steel gray hair and reading glasses that she peered over with an expression that suggested she'd seen every manipulation and heard every lie that desperate people told about child custody. The proceeding began with opening statements. The Ashfords' attorney painted a picture of a grieving widower who'd made an impulsive decision to marry a woman barely out of her teenage years, creating an unstable environment for a child who'd already suffered tremendous loss. He questioned Victor's judgment, suggested that the marriage was transparently strategic, argued that Mila deserved the stability and resources that only the Ashfords could provide. Margaret countered with Victor's exemplary record as a parent, Mila's thriving school performance and social development, the support system he'd built, including a committed partnership with someone who genuinely cared for Mila's welfare. She presented letters from Mila's teacher, her therapist, neighbors who could attest to the family's healthy functioning. Then came the testimony. Helen Ashford took the stand first, her composure perfect and her testimony devastating. She spoke about Caroline's final wishes that Mila be raised with advantages and opportunities. She described her concerns about Victor's work schedule and isolated living situation. She expressed skepticism about the marriage's timing and Arya's qualifications. "Mrs. Ashford," Margaret said during cross-examination, "how often do you visit your granddaughter?" "Twice monthly, as the custody agreement specifies." "And during these visits, have you observed any signs of neglect or harm?" Helen's pause was nearly imperceptible. "Not physical harm, no." "Emotional harm?" "Mila is clearly grieving. She needs support and stability that a single father working full-time cannot adequately provide." "But Mr. Callahan is no longer single, is he?" "A marriage of 1 month is hardly proven stability." Margaret let that hang in the air. "Mrs. Ashford, what was the length of your courtship with your husband before you married?" The Ashfords' attorney objected, and the judge sustained it, but the point had been made. Margaret moved on, methodically dismantling the narrative of neglect and instability until Helen stepped down with her composure slightly cracked. Victor testified next, walking through his daily routine with Mila, his involvement in her school and activities, the measures he'd taken to ensure she received appropriate grief counseling and emotional support. He spoke about Caroline's actual final wishes, that Mila stay with him, that he protect their daughter from being turned into a replacement for the child the Ashfords had lost. "Mr. Callahan," the Ashfords' attorney said during cross-examination, "your marriage to Miss Bennett occurred just 6 weeks after my clients filed their custody petition. Quite a coincidence." "Not a coincidence, a response to changed circumstances. A strategic response designed to improve your custody position. A genuine commitment to creating the most stable environment possible for my daughter." "You expect this court to believe you fell in love and married within 6 weeks?" "I expect this court to understand that marriage doesn't require romantic love to provide a stable, functional household. Arya and I entered our relationship with clear eyes and mutual respect. We're partners in creating a home for Mila. That's real, regardless of how it began." The attorney smiled like Victor had just admitted everything. "So you acknowledge this marriage is a partnership arrangement rather than a romantic relationship?" "I acknowledge that it's both. Partnership and respect can evolve into genuine affection. They have in our case." Arya's heart was pounding. She hadn't expected Victor to go that direction, to acknowledge the evolution of their relationship. It was risky, honest, in a way that could either strengthen their case or destroy it. Then it was her turn. Arya took the stand feeling like she might throw up. The courtroom seemed to tilt slightly as she swore to tell the truth. The Ashfords' attorney approached like a shark scenting blood. "Ms. Bennett," "I'm sorry, Mrs. Callahan. You're 20 years old, is that correct?" "Yes." "And you were a full-time student at the University of Washington before this marriage?" "I still am a student. I'm completing my degree through online coursework." "How convenient. Tell me, Mrs. Callahan, what qualifies you to help raise an 8-year-old child who's experienced significant trauma?" Arya felt Margaret tense beside her, ready to object, but Arya kept her voice steady. "I don't claim to be qualified in any professional sense. I'm not a therapist or a childhood development expert, but I care about Mila's well-being. I show up every day. I help with homework and drive to art lessons and listen when she needs to talk. Sometimes being present is more important than having credentials." You've known Mila for approximately 6 weeks. You've known her father for barely longer. This hardly seems like sufficient foundation for the commitment you've made. People make commitments based on various factors. My commitment isn't based on years of history. It's based on understanding what Mila needs and choosing to help provide it. How noble! His tone made it clear he thought it was anything but. And the fact that Mr. Callahan paid off your father's substantial debts shortly before your marriage, that had no influence on your decision? Margaret objected. Relevance, Your Honor? I'm establishing motive for this alleged commitment. Judge Thornton looked at Arya over her reading glasses. I'll allow it, but tread carefully, counselor. Arya met the attorney's eyes directly. Yes, Victor paid my father's debts before I agreed to marry him, but he did it specifically so I could choose freely. The debt was eliminated before I made any commitment. I could have walked away. But you didn't. No, I chose to be here. I chose to help create a stable home for Mila. That choice had nothing to do with debt and everything to do with recognizing that she deserves to stay with her father in the home she loves. How touching. Tell me, Mrs. Callahan, do you love your husband? The question hung in the air like a blade. Arya could feel Victor's eyes on her, feel the entire courtroom waiting for her answer. She thought about morning coffee and evening walks, about Victor's careful kindness and the way he'd held her hand that morning, about the evolution from strangers to something she couldn't quite name. I respect him deeply, she said carefully. I admire his dedication to Mila and his integrity in difficult situations. Whether that's love in the romantic sense that you're implying, I'm not certain, but I know I'm committed to this family and this partnership. So you married a man you don't love. I married a man I respect and care about, with the understanding that commitment and partnership create the foundation for deeper connection. Love isn't always a lightning strike. Sometimes it's something you build deliberately. The attorney looked like he wanted to pursue this further, but Judge Thornton intervened. I think we've established the nature of the relationship. Move on, counselor. Margaret's redirect was brief. Mrs. Callahan, in the time you've lived with Mila, have you observed her to be happy and well cared for? Yes, she's thriving. She has friends, pursues her art, does well in school. She's processing her grief in healthy ways with professional support. She has everything she needs. And do you intend to remain committed to this family? Absolutely. After Arya stepped down, there was a break while the judge reviewed submitted materials. Victor, Arya, and Margaret retreated to a small conference room down the hall. Margaret looked cautiously optimistic. That could have gone worse, she said. The love question was dicey, but you handled it well. Honest without being damaging. Victor was quiet, his jaw tight. Arya couldn't read his expression. There's one more witness, Margaret said. The judge has requested to speak with Mila privately. It's not uncommon in custody cases involving children old enough to express preferences. When? Victor asked. After lunch. The Ashfords agreed to it, though I suspect they're hoping Mila will express some uncertainty that plays to their narrative. She won't, Victor said. She's clear about wanting to stay home. Let's hope the judge sees it that way. They ate lunch at a cafe near the courthouse, though none of them had much appetite. Victor pushed food around his plate without eating. Arya managed a few bites of sandwich that tasted like cardboard. The waiting was worse than the testimony itself, the uncertainty stretching minutes into hours. You did well on the stand, Victor said quietly. Better than I expected. You expected me to fall apart? I expected the question about love to be harder for you to answer. It was hard, but it was also honest. He studied her across the table. When you said commitment and partnership create foundation for deeper connection, did you mean that? I wouldn't have said it under oath if I didn't. Arya, he started, then stopped as his phone buzzed. Margaret's message was brief. Judge is ready for Mila. Patricia bringing her now. They returned to the courthouse to find Mila already there with Patricia, the girl dressed in her favorite purple dress and looking small and scared. When she saw Victor, she ran to him and he caught her in a tight hug. It's going to be okay, he murmured against her hair. Just tell the truth. That's all you have to do. What if I say the wrong thing? There is no wrong thing, just what you actually think and feel. Mila pulled back and looked at Arya. Are you scared? Terrified, Arya admitted, but we're going to get through this. The girl nodded, visibly steeling herself. Then she followed the bailiff into the judge's chambers, leaving the adults to wait in anxious silence. 15 minutes passed like 15 hours. The Ashfords sat on one side of the hallway, Victor and Arya on the other, the space between them charged with tension and competing hopes. Helen's expression was confident, like she knew something they didn't. Jonathan looked troubled, his earlier sadness deepening into something that might have been regret. When Mila emerged, her face was unreadable. She walked past the Ashfords without acknowledging them and went straight to Victor, tucking herself against his side. The bailiff called them all back into the courtroom. Judge Thornton sat behind her bench with the weight of decision visible in her posture. She looked at each party in turn, the Ashfords, Victor, and Arya, and finally Mila, who'd been allowed to sit in the gallery with Patricia. I've reviewed all submitted materials, heard testimony from both parties, and spoken with Mila privately, the judge began. This is not an easy case. Both sides have legitimate concerns and genuine love for this child. However, custody decisions must be made based on the child's best interests, not the adult's preferences. Arya felt Victor go absolutely still beside her. The petitioners argue that Mila would benefit from their resources, community connections, and stable two-parent household with established history. These are valid points. However, the respondent has demonstrated consistent, engaged parenting and has created a home environment where Mila is demonstrably thriving. The addition of Mrs. Callahan to the household, while recent, appears to provide appropriate support and stability. The judge paused, looking directly at Arya and Victor. I'll acknowledge my initial skepticism about this marriage. The timing was certainly convenient. However, after hearing testimony and observing both of you in this courtroom, I believe you're genuinely committed to creating a functional household for Mila's benefit. Whether that commitment is based on romantic love or mutual respect and partnership is frankly irrelevant to this proceeding. What matters is that it appears genuine and stable. Helen's face had gone tight with barely contained fury. Jonathan had closed his eyes. Most significantly, I spoke with Mila at length about her preferences and feelings. She was articulate, thoughtful, and clear about wanting to remain in her current home with her father. While a child's preference isn't determinative, it carries considerable weight when the child is as mature and well-reasoned as Mila appears to be. Judge Thornton looked down at her papers, then back up. Therefore, I'm denying the petition for custody modification. Mila will remain in her father's primary custody. However, I'm ordering a review in 6 months to ensure the current arrangement continues to serve her best interests. Visitation with the Ashfords will continue as previously established. Court is adjourned. The gavel fell. For a moment, no one moved. Then Victor's hand found Arya's under the table, gripping tightly. Behind them, Mila made a small sound that might have been a sob or a laugh of relief. The Ashfords stood abruptly, Helen's face a mask of controlled rage. Their attorney was already gathering materials, clearly preparing to discuss appeal options. But Jonathan turned back to look at Mila with an expression of such profound loss that Arya almost felt sorry for him. You should go to her, Arya said quietly to Victor. He stood and crossed to where Mila sat with Patricia. The girl launched herself into his arms, and he held her like she was the most precious thing in the world, which, Arya realized, she was. Everything he'd done, the strategic marriage, the careful preparation, the calculated risk, all of it had been for this moment. Margaret was grinning. 6-month review is standard. Judge wants to cover herself legally, make sure this isn't just temporary performance. But we won. Primary custody stays with you. Thank you, Victor said, his voice rough with emotion. Thank you for everything. Thank your wife. Her testimony was compelling. That bit about love being something you build deliberately, that was good, really good. After they left the courthouse, Victor drove them to a quiet park overlooking the water. Mila ran ahead to a playground. Her earlier fear transformed into explosive energy. Victor and Arya sat on a bench watching her, the weight of the past weeks finally lifting. We did it, Arya said. You did it. If you'd fallen apart on the stand, if you'd been defensive or uncertain, the judge might have seen through everything. I just told the truth. The truth that you're committed to this family despite having every reason not to be. He turned to face her. What you said about love being something you build, did you mean that generally or specifically about us? Arya watched Mila swing higher and higher, her dark hair flying. I don't know anymore. When I agreed to this arrangement, I thought I could keep it compartmentalized. contract, performance, clearly defined boundaries. But it's not like that now. I care about Mila genuinely. I respect you more than I expected to. When you held my hand this morning, it didn't feel like strategy. It felt real. It was real. So what does that mean for us, for this arrangement? Victor was quiet for a long moment. I don't have a good answer. I know I value having you in my life and Mila's life. I know this household functions better with you in it, whether that's partnership, friendship, or the beginning of something more I can't say yet. The 6-month review. If the judge sees we're still functioning well, will the Ashfords back off? Possibly, or they'll appeal and start this whole process again. He exhaled slowly. But for now, we have breathing room. Time to figure out what this is without a custody battle forcing our hand. Mila ran back to them, breathless and smiling wider than Arya had ever seen. Can we get ice cream? Patricia said we should celebrate. Ice cream sounds perfect, Victor said. They drove to a small shop in town, the kind of place that made flavors from scratch and let you sample before committing. Mila ordered mint chocolate chip with gummy bears mixed in, a combination that made the teenager behind the counter look faintly ill. Victor got plain vanilla. Arya chose lavender honey. They sat outside despite the gray weather, eating ice cream and pretending everything was settled when they all knew the 6-month review loomed ahead. But for this moment, this afternoon of relief and ice cream and Mila's unrestrained joy, they could pretend they were just a normal family celebrating a normal victory. Thank you, Mila said suddenly, looking at Arya, for coming to the courthouse, for saying those things about me and Dad, for being honest about everything. You're welcome. But you're the one who was brave, going into the judge's chambers alone, speaking up for what you wanted. I just told the truth, like you did. Mila took a large bite of her improbable ice cream combination. The judge asked me if I liked having you live with us. I said yes. She asked if you were nice to me. I said you were honest, which is better than nice. What else did she ask? If I felt safe, if I had everything I needed, if I understood that Grandma and Grandpa love me and want what's best for me. Mila's expression went serious. I told her I know they love me, but their version of what's best isn't my version. I want to stay home with Dad, with both of you. After ice cream, they drove back to the mountain house in comfortable silence. The forest seemed to welcome them back, the familiar curves of the road leading them away from courtrooms and lawyers and the Ashfords' cold certainty. When they pulled into the garage, Mila unbuckled and hugged Victor from the back seat. We're really staying here, right? For real? For real. Good. Because I couldn't leave the cedar tree. Mom's there. That night after Mila went to bed, Arya found Victor on the deck overlooking the valley. The stars were brilliant in the clear mountain air, more visible than they'd been in weeks. He looked up as she joined him, his expression softer than usual. She's asleep, Arya reported, out cold the moment her head hit the pillow. The stress finally caught up with her. He returned his gaze to the stars. I keep thinking about what could have happened if the judge had ruled differently, if she'd decided Mila should go to the Ashfords. But she didn't. Because you convinced her our marriage was legitimate, because you sat on that stand and admitted uncertainty while also demonstrating commitment. That's a difficult balance. I had good motivation. Mila deserves to stay here. Victor turned to face her fully. Can I ask you something? And will you answer honestly? Haven't we been honest with each other from the beginning? Mostly. But I want to know, do you regret this? Any of it? The arrangement, the marriage, giving up your college life? Arya considered the question seriously. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that my father's mistakes put me in a position where this seemed like the best option. But do I regret the actual choice? No. Being here with you and Mila, building something real out of a strategic arrangement, that's been worthwhile. Even with 6 more months of the Ashfords watching our every move? Even with that, he reached out and pulled her closer, his arms encircling her in a way that felt nothing like strategy and everything like genuine need. Arya leaned into him, feeling his heartbeat steady against her ear. They stood like that under the stars, 2 people who'd started as strangers and become something neither of them had planned. Thank you, he said quietly, for all of it, for saying yes in this first place, for showing up every day, for caring about Mila when you didn't have to. I did have to. It's in the contract. She felt him smile against her hair. The contract specifies legal presence and appropriate behavior. It doesn't require genuine affection or middle-of-the-night homework help or learning what ice cream flavors she likes. Those things just made sense. No, those things came from caring, and I'm grateful for it. They stayed like that until the mountain cold drove them inside. The house was quiet and warm, filled with the peaceful breathing of a child who could finally sleep without fear. Arya went to her room and changed into pajamas, but sleep felt impossible. She was too wired from the hearing, from Victor's embrace, from the strange reality of having won something that had never felt entirely like hers to win. A soft knock made her turn. Victor stood in her doorway, still dressed but looking uncertain in a way she'd never seen from him. "I can't sleep," he admitted. "Neither can I." "Would you... This is going to sound strange, but would you just sit with me downstairs in the living room? I don't want to be alone right now." They ended up on the couch with tea that neither of them really drank, talking about everything except the custody hearing. Victor told her about building his business, about the early failures and late successes. Arya talked about her academic interests, about wanting to work in conflict resolution and diplomatic negotiations. They discovered they both loved mystery novels and hated horror movies, that they both preferred mountains to beaches and quiet mornings to crowded evenings. Somewhere around 2 in the morning, Arya's head drooped onto Victor's shoulder. He shifted to make her more comfortable, his arm around her automatically. When she woke hours later to gray dawn light, they were still on the couch, tangled together in sleep. The tea long since gone cold. Victor's eyes opened and met hers, and for a moment neither of them moved. Then he smiled, slow and genuine, and Arya felt something shift in her chest, something that felt dangerously like the beginning of love she'd claimed could be built deliberately. "Good morning," he said quietly. "Good morning." "We fell asleep on the couch." "Apparently. That's very domestic of us." "Practically a real married couple." His smile widened. "Practically." Above them they heard Mila's door open and small feet padding toward the stairs. Victor and Arya untangled themselves and tried to look like they'd planned to sleep on the couch, rather than fallen into it accidentally. Mila appeared at the bottom of the stairs in her space-themed pajamas, took in the scene, and grinned. "You guys look like you had a sleepover." "We were talking and fell asleep," Victor explained. "That's cute. Like actual married people." She headed toward the kitchen. "I'm making toast. Do you want some?" After she disappeared, Victor looked at Arya with something like wonder. "We survived the custody hearing and now we're being teased by an 8-year-old about falling asleep together. Is this what normal family life looks like?" "I think it might be." And for the first time since agreeing to this arrangement, Arya thought that maybe normal family life was exactly what they were building, contract or no contract, strategy or genuine connection. Maybe the difference didn't matter anymore. The months following the custody hearing settled into something Arya had never quite experienced before. The quiet rhythm of actual family life. Winter deepened in the mountains, bringing snow that transformed the forest into something from a fairy tale. Mila taught Arya how to build proper snow forts with strategic wall placement and ammunition stockpiles. Victor proved surprisingly competitive during snowball fights, his usual reserve cracking into genuine laughter when Mila managed to nail him square in the back of the head. The 6-month review loomed in everyone's awareness like weather on the horizon, but they'd learned to live around it rather than beneath it. The Ashfords continued their twice-monthly visits, Helen's assessment still sharp, and Jonathan's sadness still palpable, but the dynamic had shifted. They were no longer attacking. They were observing, looking for cracks that never quite appeared. "They're waiting for us to fail," Victor said one evening in January, watching through the window as the Ashfords' Mercedes disappeared down the mountain road. Mila had retreated to her room immediately after their departure, needing space to decompress. "Then we won't fail," Arya said simply. "You make it sound easy." "It is easy. We just keep doing what we're already doing." He turned from the window to look at her with an expression she was learning to read, part gratitude, part something deeper that neither of them had quite named yet. "When did you get so certain about this?" "Probably around the time it stopped being an arrangement and started being my actual life. The shift had been gradual, impossible to pin to a single moment. Maybe it was the morning she'd woken to find Mila curled in the chair beside her bed, reading quietly while Arya slept. Maybe it was the evening Victor had taught her to make his mother's recipe for beef stew, standing close in the kitchen and patiently correcting her technique. Maybe it was the accumulation of 1,000 small moments, shared coffee, evening walks, Mila's homework spread across the kitchen table while they worked in comfortable silence. Or maybe it had been real from the beginning, and they just needed time to recognize it. In February, Arya turned 21. She hadn't planned to mention it, but Mila had somehow discovered the date and refused to let it pass unmarked. She woke to find the kitchen decorated with streamers that Mila had clearly hung herself, several at dangerously tilted angles. Victor had made pancakes without setting off the fire alarm, which Arya considered an impressive birthday gift in itself. "You're officially an adult now," Mila announced, pouring syrup with abandon. "Even though you've been acting like one for months." What a ringing endorsement. It's true, though. Most 20-year-olds I see at the store are kind of useless. You actually have your life together. Victor caught Arya's eye across the table, his expression amused. High praise from someone who color codes her school supplies. "Organization is a virtue, Dad. You taught me that."
But says it was.
After breakfast, Victor disappeared into his office for a business call, while Mila dragged Arya upstairs to present her gift. A drawing she'd been working on for weeks. It showed the three of them at the cedar tree, rendered in Mila's increasingly sophisticated style. Caroline's tree, the family's tree, their tree. In the drawing, Arya stood with one hand on the trunk beside Victor and Mila, part of the family rather than apart from it. "It's beautiful," Arya said, her throat tight. "Thank you. I wanted you to see how I think of us now. Not Dad and me plus you, just us, all three together." Mila fidgeted with the edge of her shirt. "Is that okay? That I think of you as real family?" Arya pulled her into a hug. "It's more than okay. It's exactly right." That evening, after Mila went to bed, Victor presented his own gift, a small box wrapped in elegant paper. Inside was a delicate necklace, a silver pendant shaped like a compass rose. "For someone who's navigating new territory," he said quietly. "You've found your way remarkably well." Arya turned the pendant in her fingers, catching the light. "It's perfect. But you didn't have to." "I wanted to. You've given up a great deal for this family. The least I can do is acknowledge your birthday properly. Help me put it on." She turned and lifted her hair while he fastened the clasp, his fingers warm against her neck. When she turned back, he was standing closer than strictly necessary, looking at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Arya, I need to tell you something." "Okay." "This arrangement, this marriage, somewhere along the way it stopped being strategy for me. I can't tell you exactly when it happened, but you've become essential to my life in ways I didn't anticipate. Not just for the custody case, for me." Her heart was hammering. "Victor, you don't have to say anything. I'm not asking you to feel the same way. I just wanted you to know that what I said in court about partnership evolving into affection, that wasn't performance. It was truth. You matter to me." Arya touched the compass pendant, grounding herself. "You matter to me too, more than I planned for, more than the contract specifies." "So what do we do about that?" "I don't know. What do people do when a fake marriage starts becoming real?" He smiled, reaching up to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear in the gesture that had become familiar. "I suppose they figure it out as they go." "That's not very strategic." "No. But maybe that's all right. Maybe not everything needs to be planned and calculated." He leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to. She didn't want to. His kiss was gentle, questioning, nothing like the strategic performance they'd maintained for outside observers. This was honest, tentative, the first real vulnerability either of them had shown. When they pulled apart, Arya was smiling. "That was nice. Just nice. I'm 21 now. I have to maintain some dignity." "Of course. Very mature of you." They stood there grinning at each other like teenagers rather than adults, navigating a complicated arrangement, and Arya thought that maybe this was how love actually worked. Not lightning strikes or fairy tale romance, but slow accumulation of moments that added up to something real. The 6-month review arrived in March with the kind of gray drizzle that Seattle did better than anywhere. They drove to the courthouse in the same Range Rover, wearing the same professional clothes, but everything felt different now. They weren't performing for a judge, they were simply presenting the truth of what they'd built. Judge Thornton looked them over with the same assessing gaze she'd used 6 months prior, but this time Arya met it without anxiety. They had nothing to hide. The marriage that had started as strategy had evolved into genuine partnership, and no amount of skeptical inquiry could change that. The hearing was shorter this time. Margaret presented updated materials. Teacher reports showing Mila's continued thriving, therapy notes indicating healthy emotional development, letters from neighbors and community members attesting to the family's stability. The Ashfords' attorney had less ammunition to work with. 6 months of observation had failed to produce evidence of instability or harm. "Mrs. Callahan," Judge Thornton said, addressing Arya directly, "6 months ago you sat in this courtroom and told me that love could be built deliberately. Has that proven true in your experience?" "Yes, Your Honor, very much so." "Can you elaborate?" Arya glanced at Victor, who nodded slightly. 6 months ago I was committed to creating a stable home for Mila, but I wasn't sure what my relationship with Victor would evolve into. Now I can say with certainty that we've built something real. We're partners in the fullest sense. We support each other, communicate openly, make decisions together about Mila's welfare. Whether that's romantic love or deep friendship or something that doesn't have a neat label, it works. Our household functions, Mila is happy, and we're genuinely invested in each other's lives. Mr. Callahan, do you agree with that assessment? Victor's hand found Arya's under the table, their fingers intertwining naturally. Completely. Arya has become essential to both my life and Mila's. This marriage may have begun as a strategic response to your petition, but it's evolved into something neither of us anticipated and both of us value. Judge Thornton made notes, her expression unreadable. Then she turned to the Ashfords. "Mr. and Mrs. Ashford, you've had 6 months to observe this household's functioning. What are your current concerns?" Helen's composure was perfect as always, but something in her eyes had changed. The cold certainty had softened into something that might have been resignation. "Your Honor, we still believe Mila would benefit from the resources and community we could provide. However, we acknowledge that she appears stable and happy in her current environment. Our granddaughter's well-being is our primary concern." It was the closest thing to concession Arya had ever heard from Helen Ashford. Jonathan cleared his throat. "Your Honor, if I may speak frankly." "Please do." "My wife and I lost our daughter 14 months ago. That grief has colored our judgment in ways we're only now beginning to recognize. We wanted Mila with us, not because Victor is an inadequate parent. He's clearly dedicated to her, but because having her felt like keeping a piece of Caroline alive." His voice roughened. "But Mila isn't a piece of Caroline. She's her own person, with her own needs and preferences. And what she needs is to stay with her father in the home she loves." Helen's face remained composed, but her hand found Jonathan's, holding tight. "We would like to maintain our visitation schedule," Jonathan continued. "We love our granddaughter and want to remain part of her life. But we're withdrawing our custody petition. This battle isn't serving anyone, least of all Mila." The courtroom went absolutely still. Margaret looked stunned. Victor's grip on Arya's hand tightened almost painfully. Judge Thornton leaned forward. "Mr. Ashford, you're certain about this decision?" "We are. We've spent 6 months watching Mila thrive in her current environment. Continuing to fight for custody would be selfish. We're not withdrawing because we don't love her. We're withdrawing because we do." Judge Thornton turned to her notes, then back to the room. "Very well. Given the petitioner's withdrawal, I'm closing this case. Primary custody remains with Mr. Callahan. Visitation with the Ashfords will continue as currently established unless both parties agree to modifications. I strongly encourage all of you to consider family counseling to process the loss you've all experienced and build a healthier co-parenting relationship." She looked directly at Victor and the Ashfords. "Mila needs all of you. She needs her father, and she needs her grandparents. Find a way to make that work without the court's involvement." The gavel fell for the final time. In the hallway afterward, Jonathan approached Victor while Helen hung back, her composure finally cracking at the edges. "I owe you an apology," Jonathan said quietly. "We've been trying to claim Mila as a way to avoid dealing with Caroline's death. That wasn't fair to you or to her. I understand grief, Victor said carefully. I don't think either of us has processed Caroline's loss in healthy ways. Mine just happened to be less destructive to Mila's stability. Your wife, Jonathan glanced at Arya. She's good with Mila. Caroline would have liked her, I think, would have appreciated her honesty. Caroline would have liked knowing Mila was cared for, Victor agreed. That's all she asked at the end. Keep Mila safe. Let her be happy. Helen approached slowly, her perfect posture slightly diminished. We'd like to take Mila to lunch next visit. Just the three of us. No legal tension, no assessment. Just grandparents spending time with their granddaughter. I think Mila would like that, Victor said. Thank you for withdrawing the petition, for recognizing what she needs. We're not monsters, Victor. We just loved our daughter very much and handled her loss poorly. Helen's eyes moved to Arya. You've done well with her, with Mila. She speaks highly of you during visits. That matters. After the Ashfords left, Margaret practically bounced with relief. That's it. You're done. No more reviews, no more hearings. You won. Victor looked at Arya, his expression complex. We won. They collected Mila from school together, having agreed it was better for her to attend rather than miss another day waiting at courtrooms. She came running out when she saw the Range Rover, her backpack bouncing. Is it over? She asked before even getting in. Really over? Really over, Victor confirmed. The Ashfords withdrew their petition. You're staying here. Mila launched herself at him, then at Arya, hugging them both with fierce intensity. I knew we'd win. I knew it. How did you know? Arya asked. Because we're real. We're an actual family. The judge could see that. Everyone could see that. She pulled back, her serious face breaking into a grin. Can we get pizza to celebrate? Again with the pizza, Victor said. Don't you want something more special? Pizza is special, and you can't burn it because someone else cooks it. She makes an excellent point, Arya said. That evening, they sat around the kitchen table with pizza and salad, the three of them talking over each other in the easy chaos that had become normal. Mila described her day at school, her upcoming art show, her friend Katie's drama about whether to try out for soccer. Victor talked about finally closing the Portland deal. Arya mentioned that her online course professor had suggested she apply for a summer internship with an international relations nonprofit. You should do it, Victor said immediately. If it's what you want. It's in Seattle. I'd have to commute or stay in the city a few days a week. So we'll figure it out. This arrangement, he paused, then corrected himself. This marriage doesn't mean you have to give up your ambitions. But the contract, forget the contract. We're not operating under those terms anymore. He reached across the table to take her hand. You're not trapped here, Arya. You're choosing to be here. There's a difference. And if your career requires some flexibility in living arrangements, we'll work it out. Mila looked between them with knowing eyes. You guys are being weird again. In a good way, but weird. How are we being weird? Arya asked. You keep looking at each other all soft and stuff. It's cute, but also kind of gross. Victor laughed, the sound genuine and unguarded. We'll try to be less gross. Don't try too hard. It's nice seeing you happy. After Mila went to bed, Victor and Arya ended up on the deck despite the cold March air, wrapped in blankets and watching stars emerge. The custody battle was finally, definitively over. The Ashfords had withdrawn. The 6-month review had concluded positively. They were free to simply be whatever they were becoming. I need to ask you something, Victor said into the comfortable silence, and I need you to answer honestly. Okay? Now that the custody case is resolved, now that the strategic reason for this marriage no longer exists, do you want to stay? Arya's heart clenched. Are you asking me to leave? No, I'm asking if you want to stay for real, not because of a contract or legal obligation. I'm asking if what we've built here is something you want to continue building. She turned to face him fully. Victor, I haven't thought of this as an arrangement in months. I don't wake up thinking about the contract or the $5 million or the strategic benefits. I wake up thinking about whether Mila has a test today and if we need groceries and whether I should try that new coffee blend you mentioned. This is my life now. Not because I'm obligated to be here, but because I want to be. You're sure? You're 21, Arya. You have your whole life ahead of you, staying here, raising someone else's child, being married to someone 20 years older. That's a significant choice. It's my choice. And I'm choosing this. I'm choosing you and Mila and this ridiculous mountain house and morning coffee and evening walks to the cedar tree. I'm choosing all of it. He pulled her close, his lips finding hers in a kiss that was nothing like that first tentative exploration on her birthday. This was certain, committed, the kind of kiss that said, "This is real, and I'm not letting go." When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, Victor rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he said quietly. "I didn't plan to. I tried not to. But I do. I love you too." Which is inconvenient because it definitely violates the spirit of our business arrangement. The business arrangement is void. We're operating under new terms now. What terms? Standard marriage terms. Commitment, partnership, figuring things out together as we go. Those sound reasonable. I accept. They stayed outside until the cold drove them in, then made tea they didn't drink and talked until late about everything and nothing. Her summer internship possibilities, his next property acquisition, Mila's art show, whether they should finally do something about Caroline's studio. Not to erase her memory, but to let it evolve into something that served the living rather than preserving the past. Mila asked me a few weeks ago if we could turn the studio into a proper art room she could use, Victor admitted. She said Mom would want her things to be useful rather than sitting empty like a museum. What did you tell her? That I'd think about it. But she's right. Caroline loved that space because she created things there. Keeping it locked and unused isn't honoring her memory. It's just avoiding grief. We could do it together, the three of us. Go through things. Decide what to keep, what to incorporate into the new space. Let Mila be part of the transformation. That sounds right. He pulled her closer on the couch. How did you get so wise about grief? You're 21. I watched my family fall apart over something much less significant than death. I learned that clinging to what was doesn't prevent loss. It just keeps you stuck. Moving forward isn't betrayal. It's survival. They fell asleep on the couch again, tangled together in a way that had become familiar. When Arya woke to gray dawn light and found Mila sitting in the chair across from them, sketchbook in her lap, and a satisfied smile on her face, she wasn't even surprised. "How long have you been there?" she asked groggily. "Long enough to finish this." Mila held up her sketchbook showing a new drawing, Victor and Arya asleep on the couch, looking peaceful and right together. "That's either sweet or slightly creepy," Victor said, his voice rough with sleep. "It's art, Dad. Art can be both." The weeks that followed were lighter somehow. The weight of legal scrutiny and strategic performance finally lifted. The Ashfords' next visit was markedly different. Helen and Jonathan took Mila to lunch as promised, and when they brought her home, Jonathan stayed for coffee. They talked awkwardly but genuinely about Mila's schoolwork, about plans for summer, about small things that gradually built towards something that looked like family rather than adversaries. "Caroline would have wanted this," Helen said quietly as they were leaving. "All of us finding a way to coexist for Mila's sake. I'm sorry it took us so long to understand that." In April, they finally tackled Caroline's studio together. It took a full weekend to sort through paintings and art supplies, to decide what should be preserved and what could be repurposed. Mila found her mother's journals filled with sketches and notes about technique, about seeing light and shadow, about finding beauty in ordinary moments. They kept those carefully, along with Caroline's favorite brushes and the unfinished painting of the cedar tree. "We should finish it," Mila said, studying the canvas. "Not paint over Mom's work, but complete what she started. Together." So they did, working carefully to match Caroline's style while adding their own touches. Victor's steady hand for fine details, Arya's eye for color balance, Mila's instinctive understanding of her mother's artistic vision. The finished painting showed the cedar tree in full glory, rooted in earth and reaching toward sky, permanent and alive. They hung it in the living room where everyone could see it, a reminder of what had been and what continued to grow. Arya accepted the summer internship in Seattle, commuting 3 days a week and staying in the city when necessary. Victor supported it completely, even helping her find a small apartment she could use when late meetings made the mountain drive impractical. Mila accepted her occasional absence with grace, understanding that family meant supporting each other's growth rather than demanding constant presence. On a warm evening in early June, with summer stretching ahead full of promise, Victor made Arya dinner in the newly renovated kitchen. He'd learned to cook properly over the winter, taking classes online during slow work weeks. The meal was ambitious: braised short ribs, roasted vegetables, a salad that actually involved more than dumping contents from a bag. "This is incredible," Arya said, genuinely impressed. "When did you become a real chef?" "I'm hardly a chef, but I figured if we're going to do this properly, I should learn to cook something that won't make Mila beg for pizza every night." "Where's Mila, anyway?" "Sleeping over at Katie's house, which means we have the evening to ourselves." He set down his fork, suddenly looking nervous in a way she rarely saw. "I wanted to talk to you about something." "Okay." "Our marriage began as a contract, a strategic arrangement designed to solve immediate problems, but it's become something real, something neither of us planned, but both of us value." "Yes, we've established this." "Right. But the foundation was still that original agreement, the contract, the terms, the transactional nature of how this started." He reached across the table to take her hand. "I want to change that. I want us to start over, do this right." Arya's breath caught. "What are you saying?" Victor stood and pulled a small box from his pocket, then got down on one knee beside her chair. When he opened the box, the ring inside caught the light, a simple diamond on a silver band that matched the compass necklace he'd given her for her birthday. "Arya Bennett Callahan, will you marry me? Not because of custody battles or debt or strategic necessity, but because I love you and I want to spend my life with you. Will you choose this partnership freely without contracts or contingencies, just because it's what we both want?" Tears were streaming down her face. "We're already married, you realize. This is technically redundant. Legally, yes, but emotionally, symbolically, I want you to have the choice to say yes without any external pressure. So I'm asking, will you marry me again for real this time?" "Yes. Obviously, yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger beside the plain band they'd bought at a jewelry store the day before their courthouse ceremony. This ring was different, chosen specifically for her, representing choice rather than strategy, love rather than arrangement. "I thought we could have a ceremony this fall," Victor said, pulling her to her feet and into his arms. "Something small, just close friends and family. Mila's already planning decorations. The Ashfords have agreed to attend. Your parents are invited if you want them there." "You've been planning this?" "For months, since about February when I realized this wasn't an arrangement anymore. It was just my life, and I wanted it to be official in a way that had nothing to do with court orders or strategic positioning." Arya kissed him thoroughly, pouring every ounce of affection and gratitude and pure joy into it. "This is the least practical thing you've ever done. A proposal for a marriage that already exists. Sometimes impractical is exactly right." They spent the evening on the deck, talking about ceremony plans and future dreams. Arya's internship was going well enough that she might receive a job offer afterward. Victor's business continued to grow, but he'd started delegating more, prioritizing time with family over endless work hours. Mila was thriving, her art improving dramatically, her nightmares increasingly rare. The next morning when Mila returned from her sleepover, she spotted Arya's new ring immediately. "Oh my gosh, Dad proposed, like a real proposal." "How did you know?" Victor asked. "Because I helped pick out the ring, obviously. You have terrible taste in jewelry. You would have bought something boring and practical." "I resent that characterization." "It's accurate, though," Arya said, examining the ring in the morning light. "This is beautiful, Mila. Thank you for helping." "So we're doing a real wedding this time, with a party and everything?" "If you want to." "I definitely want to. I'm going to need a new dress, something purple. And we should have the ceremony at the cedar tree." Her face grew thoughtful. "Mom would like that, I think. Us making new memories there while still honoring her." That fall, on a clear October afternoon, with leaves turning gold and red in the forest, they held their second wedding. It was nothing like the courthouse ceremony. This was celebration rather than transaction, joy rather than strategy. Mila stood beside Arya as maid of honor in her purple dress, serious and proud. Margaret attended, along with Patricia and several of Victor's business associates who'd become genuine friends. The Ashfords came, Helen and Jonathan both visibly moved as Victor and Arya exchanged vows they'd written themselves. Arya's parents were there too, though their presence was complicated. Her father kept thanking Victor quietly for giving their family a second chance. Her mother cried through the entire ceremony. They were trying, Arya supposed. It was more than she'd expected. I, Victor James Callahan, choose you, Arya Marie Bennett, as my partner and my wife, Victor said, his voice steady and sure. Not because circumstances demanded it, but because my life is immeasurably better with you in it. I promise to support your ambitions, respect your choices, and build with you whatever comes next. I choose you freely, completely, and for as long as we both shall live. I, Arya Marie Bennett, choose you, Victor James Callahan, as my partner and my husband, Arya replied, her voice breaking slightly with emotion. You've taught me that love isn't always lightning strikes and fairy tale romance. Sometimes it's choosing someone every day, building something real from unexpected foundations. I promise to keep choosing you, to keep building with you, to honor what we've created and what we'll continue creating together. I choose you freely, completely, forever. They exchanged rings, her new diamond, and a matching band for Victor that replaced the simple gold one from their courthouse ceremony. When they kissed, Mila cheered loudly, and the small gathering applauded. The reception was held at the house, simple and warm. Food catered from the cafe where Victor had first introduced Arya to Mila, music playing from speakers on the deck, people mingling on the lawn as autumn sunlight slanted through the trees. Jonathan Ashford approached Arya during the reception, his expression softer than she'd ever seen it. I owe you an apology as well, he said quietly. When we first met, I dismissed you as opportunistic, too young, insufficient for what Mila needed. I was wrong. You've been exactly what this family needed. Thank you. That means a great deal. Caroline would have liked you. She always valued honesty and courage, and you've demonstrated both. He glanced to where Victor stood with Mila, both of them laughing at something Margaret had said. Take care of them. Not because it's your obligation, but because they're worth it. I know they are. And I will. As evening approached and guests began departing, Mila pulled both Arya and Victor toward the cedar tree. The three of them stood beneath its spreading branches, hands on the bark in the ritual that had become theirs. We should tell Mom about the wedding, Mila said seriously. She should know we're happy. So they did, taking turns speaking to the tree about the ceremony, the celebration, the way forward. It felt less strange than it once had, this practice of talking to something ancient and permanent that had witnessed Caroline's life and now witnessed theirs. I think she knows, Victor said finally, looking up through the branches to where stars were beginning to emerge. I think she's been watching out for us all along. That's a nice thought, Arya said. It's more than thought. It's what I choose to believe. That Caroline's love for Mila didn't end when she died. That somehow she guided us to this moment, this family, this improbable happiness. They walked back to the house together as true darkness fell, Mila between them holding both their hands. The house glowed warm with light, music still playing faintly from the deck speakers. Patricia was inside cleaning up, shooing them away when they tried to help, insisting they enjoy their wedding night. Later, after Mila was asleep and Patricia had gone home, Victor and Arya stood in their room, not separate bedrooms anymore, but genuinely shared space they'd created together. Arya's books mingled with Victor's on the shelves, her clothes hung beside his in the closet. The room held evidence of actual cohabitation, real marriage, chosen partnership. Did you ever imagine, Victor asked, pulling her close, when you agreed to that arrangement that we'd end up here? Never. I thought I was entering a business transaction that would end in 10 years with a substantial payout and a strange story to tell at dinner parties. What would you tell people at dinner parties now? That I married a man I barely knew for practical reasons, and somehow discovered that practical reasons could evolve into real love. That the best decisions are sometimes the ones that make no sense until you're living them. That's a good story. It's a true story, which makes it even better. He kissed her softly, then deeper, and they fell into bed together with the ease of people who'd learned each other slowly, deliberately, without rush or pretense. This wasn't the wedding night from their courthouse ceremony when they'd maintained separate rooms and careful distance. This was real marriage, real intimacy, the culmination of months of choosing each other over and over. Afterward, wrapped together in comfortable silence, Arya thought about the journey from that birthday party at the country club to this moment. How a desperate proposal from a stranger had become the foundation of something more real than anything she'd planned for herself. "Are you happy?" Victor asked quietly. "Incredibly. Are you?" "More than I thought possible after Caroline died. I thought I'd used up my capacity for this kind of happiness. But you proved me wrong. I'm good at proving people wrong. It's my special skill." He laughed, the sound rumbling through his chest against her ear. "Yes, you are." Morning came with weak autumn sunlight and Mila's cheerful voice announcing she was making breakfast. They found her in the kitchen, attempting pancakes with mixed results. The first few were burned, but she was improving with each attempt. "I wanted to make you guys wedding breakfast," she explained, flipping another pancake with intense concentration. "But I'm not very good at this yet." "Practice makes better," Victor said, using his favorite phrase. "Not perfect, just better." "These are perfect," Arya said, accepting a plate of slightly lopsided pancakes. "Best wedding breakfast I've ever had." "It's the only wedding breakfast you've ever had." "Which makes it automatically the best." They ate together at the kitchen table, syrup and laughter, and the comfortable chaos of family life. Through the windows, the forest was brilliant with autumn colors, beautiful and temporary and exactly right. "What should we do today?" Mila asked. "It's Sunday. We should do something special." "What do you suggest?" Victor asked. "Let's go to the meadow. Have a picnic. Just the three of us." So they did, packing sandwiches and fruit and the cookies Patricia had left from the reception. They walked the familiar trail through the forest, Mila running ahead and circling back like an excited puppy. The meadow was at its autumn best, wildflowers giving way to golden grass, the cedar tree standing sentinel. They spread a blanket under the tree and ate lunch in comfortable silence, broken by occasional conversation. Mila sketched in her notebook while Arya read and Victor checked his phone for work messages he mostly ignored. "This is good," Mila said eventually, looking up from her drawing. "This family, us." "It is good," Victor agreed. "Even though it started kind of weird." "Especially because it started weird," Arya said. "The weird beginning made us appreciate the normal middle." "Are we in the middle, though? Or is this still the beginning?" "I don't know. What do you think?" Mila considered this seriously. "I think we're at the end of the beginning. We figured out how to be a family. Now we just get to be one." "That's very philosophical," Victor said. "I'm deep, Dad. I contain multitudes." "Did you read that somewhere?" "Maybe, but it's still true." As afternoon stretched toward evening, they stayed under the cedar tree, none of them quite ready to return to the house yet. This moment felt significant somehow, worth preserving in memory, the three of them together, no longer bound by contracts or custody battles or external pressure. Just a family choosing to be together because it was where they all wanted to be. "I love you both," Mila said suddenly, her voice serious. "Like really love you, not just family obligation love, actual real love." "We love you too," Arya said, her throat tight. "So much." "I know, I can tell." Mila returned her attention to her sketchbook. "I just wanted to say it out loud, so everyone knows." When they finally walked back to the house as dusk gathered, Arya thought about everything that had brought them to this point. Her father's financial collapse, Victor's custody battle, an arrangement born from necessity that had somehow transformed into genuine love. They'd started as strangers brought together by impossible circumstances. They'd become partners through strategic performance, and somewhere in the midst of morning coffee and evening walks and homework help and shared grief, they'd become family. Not because they had to, because they chose to. That night, after Mila was finally asleep and Victor was working in his office, and Arya sat in the living room with her textbooks, she looked at the painting of the cedar tree on the wall. Caroline's vision, completed by the family that had come after her, honoring what was while building what would be. Her phone buzzed with a message from her mother asking how the wedding had been, if she was happy, if this strange arrangement had somehow worked out despite all odds. Arya typed back a simple response. "It worked out. I'm happy. I'm home. And she was. This mountain house with its forest views and cedar tree and warm kitchen and shared spaces, this was home in a way her parents' house in Seattle or her dorm room had never been. Not because it was perfect, but because it was real. Built deliberately by people who'd chosen each other without illusion or pretense. Victor appeared in the doorway, his work apparently finished for the night. "Come to bed," he said simply. Arya closed her textbook and followed him upstairs to the room they shared, the life they'd built, the marriage they'd chosen twice. Once out of strategy and once out of love, but both times with clear eyes and honest hearts. And that, she thought as she fell asleep in her husband's arms with her stepdaughter sleeping safely down the hall, was the best foundation anyone could ask for. Not where they'd started, but where they'd arrived. Not the arrangement, but what it had become. Not the contract, but the choice.